from all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host and fellow agitator is Adam Keller, and we are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today on the program, a beleaguered EEOC continues to fight for workers. The Biden administration is trying to drive down wages. Yes, really. We talked to Tony Quillen, business manager of the IBEW 558 here in North Alabama, and more on today's Valley Labor Report. If you want to be part of the program today, we've got a phone number and the line is open. You can call or text 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave a voicemail throughout the week and we might play it on the next program. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap on the radio, or if you want to see what we're up to, you can find us online, where anywhere you can find anything online, on Twitter, on Facebook, YouTube, and newly on TikTok. We're on TikTok, and I did some, so what? One of the things that we do on YouTube is cut clips from the program and put them on as its own video, and so we've been doing that on TikTok as well. But yesterday, was it yesterday or the day before that? Earlier this week, I did some native TikTok-only content. I just recorded a rant. I was feeling agitated. I was feeling irritated, and I just picked up my phone and I was like, well, we have this TikTok account. I'll put something on there. So in addition to getting clips from the show on the TikTok, you might even get TikTok exclusive content. So follow us on that. Give all your data to the Chinese government. That's great. And yeah, you'll be able to find us on there.
It's what the kids are doing.
It's what the kids are doing. So we want to be where the kids are, even if we have to give all of our data to the Chinese government. We're already giving all of our data to American billionaires. Why not give them to Chinese billionaires too?
Might as well.
Might as well. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners.
No American or Chinese billionaires are funding this show, in fact.
That's right. No American or Chinese billionaires fund the show. All of our funding comes from unions, from nonprofits, and from our listeners. And there's one union-represented business, Unionly, is one of our sponsors. They're a business, but they're union represented, and they work with unions. So if you're a member of a local union and you want to sponsor the show, hit me up. No better time to do that than now. If you want to become a sustaining member of the program, make a one-time donation, or buy this hat, you can go to our website, tvlr.fm, or our Patreon at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. So we've got a local story here in Alabama. The EEOC put out a statement on Tuesday announcing a federal lawsuit against Chipotle for their failure to provide a workplace free from harassment. Before we get too deep in the weeds on that, though, Adam, can you just tell us what, because when we talk about the NLRB, we like to try to Bring it down a little bit, explain the acronyms and stuff like that. So what is the EEOC?
So the EEOC is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and essentially they're the federal agency tasked with upholding and enforcing your rights under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which more or less says you can't be discriminated against at work for certain protected categories. And those protected categories, of course, include race, but also gender, color, religion, national origin, age, specifically the age 40 and up, pregnancy, citizenship status, familial status, disability status, veteran status, genetic information. Those are all protected categories. So if you find yourself discriminated against at work, and you believe it is because of your status, one or more statuses under those protected categories, then you may have a claim. And the EEOC is the agency where you do that. And so if you've ever just saw some news coverage, such as the one Jacob mentioned already, and you hear about discrimination claims in the workplace, harassment claims in the workplace, hostile work environment's a phrase you've probably heard. That's what we're talking about here. And this is open for any individual. You can file an EEOC claim. You do not have to belong to a union or go through a lawyer to do this. Though obviously, many people do rely on their unions and do pursue lawyers to file their claims. And essentially, once you file a claim, the EEOC will investigate. And they're going to ask from your side of the story, what evidence you have, what's your claim, how were you discriminated against, and when and where. But then they're also going to get the employer side of the story. And the employer will also have to respond in writing. So it's one of the few instances you have where you can actually make an employer respond in writing to you, or at least to the government in this case. It's also, like many agencies tasked with these sorts of protections, it's never really had the funding and the staffing to do its job really in a way that I think folks like us would be happy with. And that's not to, demean the people who are there, who are doing their best, but there's a lot of workers in this country, and there's a lot of discrimination that happens. So it's difficult for them to, attack every single instance. So a lot of people find that their claims result in an inconclusive investigation and answer by the EEOC. And at that point, you're given what we call the right to sue letter. And this will give you the opportunity to pursue litigation if you so choose. So even if the EEOC does not come right out and say, yes, you were discriminated against, and here's why we think so, even if it's an inconclusive answer, you still have the right to take it to court. And that's often where you'll hear about these discrimination lawsuits. But the last thing I'll say on that is really for it to be a hostile work environment, for it to be a good claim, you have to have a couple criteria here, 3 criteria really. First of all, a protected class that we mentioned has to be involved, whether it's disability, gender, race, etc. And you have to believe and have some evidence that whatever harm was done to you was because of your protected class. The second thing would be that it's severe enough or pervasive enough that it actually alters the terms of your employment. So an obvious one would be you got fired. But it doesn't have to be that extreme. It certainly could be lower than that. It could be promotions and demotions and salary, all of that. And the third thing would be that the employer has responsibility. So those are sort of 3 tests in terms of what makes a solid EEOC claim.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so let's go ahead and jump into this story out of Alabama. AL.com reposted an article from the Charlotte Observer by Tanisha Kinney talking about this. And so this is actually a lawsuit from the EEOC. You mentioned that if the EEOC is not going to investigate it, or their investigation is inclusive, then, you obviously personally have the right to sue. But if there's a particularly compelling case, or the EEOC does investigate, if you bring them a lot of facts, and they feel like they can take on your case, the EEOC, and this is what's happening in this case. So they filed a lawsuit, and it alleges that the company ignored complaints from the Prattville worker. And the complaints included that she was receiving unwanted sexual advances, sexual comments, and sexually offensive conduct, including sexual contact by a male manager. The same manager allegedly harassed other women at work as well. The harassment began in 2019, and the woman quit after the issue went unresolved by the company. And so, it's good what the EEOC is doing here in pursuing this issue, but I think you can see the problem. The issue being tackled is over 2 years old. The woman was forced out of the company because of the harassment that she faced. She didn't feel like she could continue going into work every day because she did not have a safe environment. She wasn't able to continue working there safely. And we're talking over 2 years just to file the lawsuit. The case is not concluded yet, right? This is almost, just the beginning of a stage that could take as long. So, how much longer is this woman going to have to wait for a resolution on this? Could it, how long is it going to take its way to wind its way through the courts? Another 2 years? A year? This woman is potentially looking at half a decade for resolution of this issue. And this is in a case where the EEOC feels like the case is so strong, they're taking it up themselves.
Right. Yeah. And that's pretty significant, the fact that they would do that, because, as I mentioned, I don't have the statistics offhand, but certainly in my experience assisting union members with these, the vast majority received an inconclusive investigation. Mm-hmm. So, to have such damning evidence that the EEOC has taken it upon themselves to do this,
this is a really strong case.
Right. And, and this is a lesson, unfortunately, that all workers should really take to heart, which is working through the legal system, through the courts, through the federal agencies that are, supposed to be there to uphold our rights under law. It is a very long process. It is a tiring process. It is not there for a quick resolution of your issue. And, that's something that all of us as working people have to deal with. We have to deal with the fact that if we have something happening on the job, yes, we have certain rights. And yes, there are lawyers available and unions available to help you pursue those rights. But that doesn't mean it's going to fix it in a reasonable time frame, because the laws are not stacked in our favor.
Right. And it's worth remembering that this is the process that corporate media plants, that people on this radio station want you to believe can and should replace unionization as a way to protect yourself on the job. This is the process where this woman is looking at half a decade for a resolution where she's being harassed at work to such a degree she does not feel safe continuing to work there. This is the process that people on this radio station are going to tell you that, oh, you don't need a union. You have the EEOC. You don't need a union. You have the Department of Labor. You don't need a union. You've got minimum wage laws. We've got child labor laws. We've got overtime laws. We have the weekend. You don't need a union because we have all of these things in the law. And then at the same time, they're going to turn around and fight against making these institutions stronger. And that's what we're going to talk about now, because clearly it can't and it won't ever be a sufficient replacement, but it can be made better. And this is not at all on the folks at the EEOC either. like so many agencies, like Adam said, like so many agencies that are tasked with doing good things for workers, politicians are reluctant to fund it. While increases like things to the police budgets and military budgets are limitless. In 1980, so let's survey the state of the EEOC and the state of the American workforce. In 1980, there were 90.9 million workers in the United States. Today, there are 163.5 million. We are approaching double the workforce that we had in 1980, and the federal agency tasked with stopping and remedying workplace discrimination and harassment has only 56% of the staff that it did in 1980.
Wow.
They have less staff now as a real number, not like when you account for ratio or anything. There were about 3,500 staff at the EEOC in 1980, and today there are less than 2,000. About 56% of the staff that it did in 1980. When you account for inflation, it has less funding than it did in 1980. In just the 10 years from 2009 to 2019, the agency lost more than 20% of its investigators. The EEOC also has to enforce more laws today than it did in 1980, like the Americans with Disability Act, the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. These are all laws against discrimination in the workplace that were not around in 1980. So in addition to we have a larger workforce, we now have more protections theoretically against discrimination and harassment in the workplace than we did in 1980. And we have less funding and less manpower.
Yeah, I mean, common sense would tell you, hey, if we have like twice as many workers and we have multiple new laws to enforce, shouldn't we have maybe twice the budget and twice the manpower we had back then?
And that's even under the assumption that in 1980 everything was really great.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Which is a big assumption, obviously.
Right. Very big assumption. There was a really great article in Vox in 2019 that talked about the state of the EEOC. And so when you look at this, when you look at the state of the American workforce and the state of the funding and the staffing of the EEOC, clearly this is going to affect the ability of working people to get relief on these issues of discrimination and harassment in the workplace. From that article in Vox from 2019, quote, since 2008, the EEOC has doubled the share of complaints involving companies or local government agencies that it places on its lowest priority track. Are you following me? That means that it's not. I'm not saying that they're doubling the share of complaints involving companies. They're doubling the share of the complaints that get sent to its lowest track, effectively guaranteeing no probes, mediation, or other substantive efforts on behalf of those workers who are shunted into the lowest priority track. About 30% of cases were shunted to that category last year, according to internal data obtained by the Center for Public Integrity through a public records request. The EEOC said it has focused its limited resources on charges where the government can have the greatest impact on workplace discrimination. But as it cut its backlog by 30% in the last decade, much of that in the past 2 years, the already low share of workers getting help has dropped. Only 13% of all complaints the EEOC closed last year ended with a settlement or other relief for the workers who filed them, down from 18% in 2008. Only 13% of all complaints the EEOC closed last year ended with a settlement or other relief for the workers who filed them, compared with 18% in 2008. 18% of all complaints the EEOC closed last year ended with a settlement or other relief for the workers who filed them, compared with 18% in 2008. 18% That's a pretty big issue. And so let's see what the EEOC has to say about the investigation process. The EEOC's frequently asked question page has this to say about the length of time that workers can expect before they see resolution. Quote, the length of time needed to complete an investigation depends on a number of factors, including the number and type of issues and bases alleged in the charge and the amount of information and documentation that needs to be gathered and analyzed. In recent years, it has taken us, on average, 6 months to investigate a charge. That's just to investigate. That's not reaching a settlement. That's not filing a lawsuit. That's just how long does it take to investigate it? 6 months. However, please note that investigations can be longer or shorter than 6 months, depending on several factors indicated. We are often able to resolve a charge faster through mediation, usually in less than 3 months. Note, however, that not all cases go to mediation at the EEOC, which is what happened with this Chipotle worker. Chipotle refused to go through mediation, and so the EEOC is having to take them to court. 6 months. That's a long time for a working person to, what is going to be happening during the 6 months? A working person who's facing sexual harassment on the job is going to either be getting up every single day and continuing to deal with harassment, or they're going to quit. A worker who's having to deal with discrimination on the job, who's maybe not being paid as much as her male colleagues for the same work, or potentially a black worker who is not being given a promotion because of discrimination, they're going to have to deal with lower pay for a long time.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
absolutely.
not acceptable.
It's, I've seen these cases just drag on and on and on. And, especially when you're talking about dollar amounts, well, those dollar amounts add up over time. And, you hope that you get back pay when it's all said and done, but that doesn't keep your lights on this month.
Right.
And I think that's a great point in terms of harassment and discrimination, that if it's something you're enduring, how long can you endure it? Can you endure it for 6 months or more to get an answer from the EEOC, even if it comes back in your favor? I mean, how long can you really deal with it? Yeah. And so, my advice would be, if you find yourself in this situation, the stronger your complaint is, typically the quicker the resolution is going to be and the more favorable the outcome will be. So the more you can document, and this is just a pro tip to every worker listening, if you don't take notes at work, you're already behind the 8 ball.
Right.
You need to have a little calendar, planner, notes app on your phone, whatever it may be, to document names, people, places, any incident that doesn't feel right. Document as much of the details as you can, because you never know when you're going to need to bust these notes out.
Right.
And that could be the difference between, a 6-month investigation or maybe a 3-month investigation.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just like with the NLRB charges for Starbucks firing workers because of unionization, right? These are just workers. They don't have a year of salary that they can just sit on while they wait for a board resolution like the bosses can. And that's the issue. And of course, and recall, it's taken 2 years for this investigation to come to a point in the case of the Prattville, Alabama worker, where the agency feels comfortable moving to a lawsuit. We're already at 2.5 years on this case, and we're just now filing a lawsuit. What has this woman been doing in the 2 years since? I mean, she's probably had to get a different job. It probably would have been nice to just be able to stay at Chipotle and continue working there instead of having to find a different job. Hopefully she found a better job, but it's never fun having to go to interviews. That takes time. Having to reacclimate yourself to a new workplace, that takes time. And it's something that the bosses don't have to deal with. And this, of course, has an effect on the workers at the EEOC, because you're not going to work for an agency like the EEOC if you if you have zero connection to the kind of work, right? I mean, it's the same thing as working at the NLRB or being a union staffer or, doing some sort of justice or being a teacher. You don't get into these things to make bank. You do it because, you care about workers. And from that same Vox article, quote, "This has been wearing on the agency's workers. In 2018, almost half of EEOC staff said in a government survey that they didn't have the resources to do their jobs, which is higher than average for federal agencies. The agency had the highest percentage of staff strongly disagreeing that their workload is reasonable, as well as the highest percentage strongly agreeing that the work they do is important." Okay, do you see that? Do you see the juxtaposition there? The staffers at the EEOC are more committed to the mission of their agency than any other federal agency. They feel more strongly about it. And they also feel the most strongly that they're being asked to do too much. It's insane. Back to the article. It's really, really emotionally draining. Obviously, said former EEOC regional attorney Charles Gurrier, who was based in Birmingham, Alabama before leaving in 2012. He said he advised his staff to make peace with not being able to help every worker. The budget was so tight, he said, that sometimes his office would run out of paper because there wasn't money to buy more. I mean, paper is not expensive. The idea that you don't have enough money for paper. Back to the article. At the agency's San Diego office, former district director and mediator Tom McCammon said employees regularly went into work on weekends to spend unpaid hours finishing cases. Even so, he said, sometimes so much time passed before investigators got to a case that they couldn't reach the complainant. The phone number was dead, the home address no longer valid. Because the workers had to move, because maybe they got a job in a different town, or maybe their internet or maybe their phone service was cut off because they ended up leaving the job or getting fired because of discrimination. They couldn't pay it anymore. Maybe they became homeless. It takes so long that people's life situations can change drastically. Back to the article. In the meantime, cases are stacking up by the hundreds with no investigation. Each one of these files is a person who had a problem. This feeling has also not let up under the Biden administration. This agency was under constant attack under Trump, with his administration actually seeking to cut their budget. Not just keep it flat funding. He wanted to cut it by $20 million, Trump did. But remember, Trump is a warrior for the working class, is what they want you to believe. On top of Republicans holding up appointments, they were hoping for relief under the Biden administration, the EEOC workers were, but unfortunately, they've so far been left out in the cold. I spent about an hour and a half on the phone with current AFGE EEOC Council President Rachel Schonfield last week, and she said that she doesn't think morale has ever been lower at the agency because of the fact that the relief just hasn't come yet. Biden is currently pushing for an increase in the budget for the EEOC, but their staffing levels are still basically the same as they were under the Trump administration. There hasn't been a hiring spree. They haven't had a huge, and I don't understand this from a political perspective for the Democrats, because these budgets we're talking about are minuscule compared to other aspects of the budget. This agency has a $400 million budget annually, nationally. And that's less than they did in 1980 when you account for inflation. Why not just double it? Why not just double it? Triple it. You're not going to notice it in the national debt. If you tripled the budget for the EEOC, you would still only be, the total budget of the EEOC would be something like, 10% of the increase to the defense budget. I mean, it's just, it doesn't make political sense. And of course, it's not good for the workers that depend on the EEOC.
Right, because this is a real opportunity for like material relief to people. Right. People who are being discriminated against, in the workplace, who need help from their government to remedy the situation, whatever that looks like. And so here's an opportunity for the government to actually help people.
Yeah. Government agencies are never going to be able to replace workers securing their rights for themselves.
Right.
But there's absolutely no excuse for this situation to continue under any government. Our elected leaders, seriously, they've got to do more to adequately fund agencies like these that support working people. It's
absolutely. And I think that's why we've seen such an attack by, like you mentioned with the Trump administration, any agencies that do ostensibly serve the people that actually help everyday working class folks. Those are the agencies that are always under threat, the ones that are always being sabotaged with, directors who disagree with the mission, with budget cuts, with hiring freezes. It's meant to, not only hurt working folks by not receiving these services, but also to really just get people disenchanted with with the idea in general that government could actually be helpful.
Right. Yep, that's right. Let's take a break really quick. On the other side, we're going to be talking to Tony Quillen. He is the business manager of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 558. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. Stay tuned.
Hometown Action is a grassroots organization building a multiracial, working-class movement for racial, gender, economic, and environmental justice in Alabama's rural communities. We stand in solidarity with Alabama workers and are proud to support the Valley Labor Report's efforts to inform and build the Southern worker movement. Please visit hometownaction.org and follow our social media channels at Hometown Action to learn more about how you too can get involved to make the South a better place for all workers. Solidarity, y'all.
IBEW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBEW is the right choice.
Energy Alabama is a locally operated and membership-based nonprofit organization focused on advancing Alabama's clean energy future through education and advocacy. Many people in charge of infrastructure and building decisions simply don't know about how viable clean and renewable energy is. To that end, Energy Alabama has provided instruction to more than thousands of adults and tens of thousands of K-12 students across the state. We're working hard to build careers in clean energy and help everyday Alabamians save money on their utility bills. Learn more about our work and how you can join us at energyalabama.org.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136, out of Central Alabama. Learn more at IBEW136.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only Union Talk radio program. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, you can give us a call. The phone line is open as it is every Saturday. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also send us a text that way as well. You can also, we got lots of ways that you can get in touch with us. We are live streaming on YouTube and Facebook. And if you want to, you can chat with us right there. We get your chats there. And we appreciate you tuning in. Got lots of people tuning in on Facebook this morning. Good morning to Martha and Mel Sutton from West Alabama, Vonda McDaniel from Nashville, William Cardenas from Ohio, I believe. He came down and was hanging out with the Laborers Union. He's a staffer for the Laborers Union, and he was here in North Alabama for a while. Joe and Dana Marshall, appreciate everybody tuning in, and of course everybody in the YouTube chat. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Up next, we've got Tony Quillen. Tony Quillen is the business manager for IBEW Local 558. He is president of the State Electrical Workers and president of the North Alabama Building Trades. He's got a lot of hats, busy man. So, Tony, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you, Jacob. I'm excited about being on this morning, and can't wait to see where it goes.
Absolutely. So let's start off with a little bit about you. You know, how did you get into the union? You told me yesterday that that your family wasn't in the union. You're one of the first people in your family to be in a union. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. No members of my family have ever been associated with organized labor at that point, and I made a good friend by the name of Gene Fulmer years ago. Gene's quite a few years older than I am, but he was a member of Local 558 dating back to the late 60s. And that was my pathway in. Back when I got in, it was a little bit of a country club mentality. It was hard to get in unless you had a lot of connections. But that was my connection, and that's been 22 years ago this past April. And so it's been a great career, and I've enjoyed every minute of it.
You talked about how, you're, some people talked about it in your union, like not having much growing up, and then talking about how their parents worked for the TVA, and that was not your, that wasn't your experience before you came into the union.
That's correct. I grew up in what I would consider real poverty in Alabama, born in 1974, and I spent 1981, 1982 with no electricity. I remember taking a bath by a wood-burning stove at night. We had coal oil lamps to light our home up at the time. And the school system actually bought me my shoes and jacket for first and second grade. And so after that, I was out in the country. I moved over and I grew up in what you call the projects or government housing. And that was the early years of my life, but that's also what I would consider a catalyst for me to try to do the best I could for myself and my family when I became an adult.
And going from that to the compensation that you receive as a union electrician is a pretty big difference.
Yeah, it big difference, and it just shows the power of collective bargaining, and it also shows the commitment of those that have beat this pathway down for us in the last 125, 30 years.
Right, right. What are some of the, what is like the compensation that you talked yesterday, y'all have got 27 different contracts. So obviously it's going to be a little bit different, but generally speaking, if I talk to somebody in IBEW 558, what does their compensation package look like?
Well, so that's a complex question. We start out and we train our apprentices. And so starting pay for apprentices is around a little over $15 an hour. Plus they get their benefit package added in with that. But starting pay for a journeyman electrician in our area or in our local is $30 an hour, plus healthcare, plus 3 pensions going all at one time. But those numbers can go up. We've got members that made over $200,000 the last couple of years because of how much work we're experiencing in North Alabama right now.
Yeah, the overtime, when you're talking about making $30, $40 an hour, overtime can really add up if you start working that. And y'all have got, what kind of work do y'all do?
Okay, we are primarily, Local 558 here is primarily what you would consider a heavy industrial local unions. Some local unions lean more toward commercial work, but primarily ours is automotive plants here in North Alabama, the data centers, Facebook. We have a nuclear plant, 4 hydros. We're doing a major upgrade at the former Colbert Steam Plant. We've got work at steel mills, ULA, 3M, Counts Paper Mill. We've got 13 co-ops and municipalities in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. So essentially it's like I told you yesterday, 9-volt to lightning bolt is.
Right. Yeah, and that's all over North Alabama.
And well, we have 10 counties in North Alabama and 4 in Southern Tennessee. So we've got 14 counties covering our jurisdiction.
Gotcha. And so if somebody is listening and maybe they are interested in joining IBEW 558, what are the different I mean, just my assumption would be that you can come in as an apprentice, but also if you're a non-union electrician, what are the ways as a non-union electrician that you can come in to the union?
Okay, so what we require, and there is an avenue or a pathway to do that. What we require is 5 years verified by your W-2s that you have worked in the electrical field. And if you have that, we will bring you in, we will give you a written test, we will give you a hands-on test, and we will interview you. And if you meet the qualifications for that, that is an avenue that you can come in. Most of ours come in through our apprenticeship program. Some of those have no experience. Some of those have several years of experience, but they want that education to come with it. But there are 2 different avenues that can bring you in.
And y'all's apprenticeship program, you said didn't you say something? It's received national recognition?
Yeah, so the IBEW at the international office, they've got their own production team. It's called IBEW Our Power. It's a pretty large outfit. Our local and our apprenticeship school a few years back was the 4th one that they came in and did a story on. And that's out of the United States and Canada, and which we have a large, highly respected program, but we're very proud of that.
How many apprentices did y'all graduate last year?
So last year we graduated, matter of fact, we graduated about 30 last week and then about 5 lines. But our classes now have grown quite a bit. So we've got 5 classes going right now, and now we've got 306. And so with the boom that's happened in the last couple of years here, we went from having classes the size of 30 to 35 to like 80 and 100. And so we've last 2.5, 3 years from basically 150 apprentices across the board to around 360.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, that's and so what is that doing for y'all's market share here? I know that for, you know, there's we talk whenever we get tradespeople on, you know, so one of the things that we often hit on is the differences between the trade unions and industrial unions, maybe like the machinists, right? You know, y'all basically supply labor to contractors, whereas, you know, the machinists at ULA, they organized that company and you know, they're not kind of expanding or bidding for other work. They're employees of that company, whereas it's a little bit different for the trades unions. And one of the things that is important for the trade unions is market share, because if you can increase your market share, obviously you increase your bargaining power.
Right. Yeah, and ours, I don't know our exact numbers for 2021 and obviously this first half of 2022. I know our growth has went up tremendously. We went from 1,680 something members a couple of years ago to we're right at the threshold of 2,000 active members, and our total membership's around 2,800. But North Alabama has exploded. Obviously, you've got some major installations here. Mazda Toyota is going to $2.6 billion. It's going to employ 4,000 people. FBI is going to employ 4,000 people. I do not know how many is going to be employed at Facebook. We're doing other expansions, but we are growing, but this market is growing, and it's growing at an unbelievable rate right now. Yep.
I you know, speaking of growing a little bit, this isn't something I talked to you about yesterday, but I just thought about it, and I'm wondering your thoughts. The IBEW has expanded in other states into representing coffee workers. You know, the Starbucks workers have absolutely exploded across the United States. They've won over 100 union elections. They filed for like 300, and that's been with Starbucks Workers United, which is affiliated with Workers United, which is affiliated with SEIU. But the IBEW up in Wisconsin, I believe, they won a big union election at Collectivo Coffee, and now they're representing 100 baristas or something, and now they just announced that there's a union election somewhere else at another kind of local coffee chain. Have y'all what is the response among the broader IBEW to expansions into different industries like that?
We fully support that. To expand on that a little bit, there are nursing home facilities, there are hospitals that are represented by the IBEW. There are security officers at nuclear plants. Just one contract we have on the Army base, one contract, I've got 47 different positions or skill sets there that we represent. So we'll take all that growth. We want as many people working on collective bargaining agreements as we can get. And one part of that too, the IBEW is a very large union across North America, right at 800,000 members. And so that's a lot of name recognition and a lot of publicity with that. So that's why you're seeing that in different areas like that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. When they released the press statement on the new union election at this other local coffee chain, the person who reached out to the IBEW for it, he said he saw somebody come in with an IBEW hat and he remembered the Collectivo campaign, and he was like, "Oh, hey, would y'all can we organize with y'all here?" And they were like, "Well, hell yeah, let's do it." You know, so that's a pretty cool attitude, I think. And the another thing that you were talking, you know, just on the benefits of unionization, you know, we talked about the compensation. You talked about the pensions. Obviously, healthcare is another big thing. You know, I'm interested in what the healthcare differences are between your union electricians and the non-union electricians, but also, you know, the job security kind of aspect. You know, the idea knowing that you're protected going into work against unfair treatment, against being retaliated against or fired or disciplined for not fair cause, or you can obviously if you're a union electrician, you can be fired or you can be disciplined for not doing your job well, but you can't, your boss can't do that if he just walks in one day and he's unhappy, like, maybe him and his wife got into an argument or something, right? And you talked about a grievance that you that y'all won that you're really proud of, about this person was fired unjustly. Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. Yeah, and in every collective bargaining agreement we have, there's going to be a grievance procedure in there, and the unions wholeheartedly, will always have that in their agreements. And so I've probably processed well over 100 grievances in the last 11 or 12 years. But one is very unique in the fact that we did have a member, based off of some very inaccurate information, that was terminated. And ironically, this member and myself, we didn't have a good personal relationship. And I think when this took place, I think he had some serious reservations or cautions about, how hard I would be fighting for him. And I remember our first meeting, I told him, I said, we'll pour everything on the line and we're going to do everything we can to help you. And so this process took 8 to 10 weeks. I did not know until towards the end of this member had not told his wife that he was terminated. He received and he hit it off, and he got up every morning at 3:00 and he left his house and he came back home every day at the time that he normally got home. And it was all the way up to the end that he informed his wife of what was going on. But the good thing about this right here is the partnership that the IBEW had with this employer, this contractor, is strong. It's a longstanding partnership. And contrary to what people believe, everything is not always oil and water. It's not always a grueling battle. And we pride ourselves in building those partnerships for situations like this. And so we got to the point that we got to federal mediation. And once all of the facts came to life, this employee was reinstated. This employee, and this has been 7 years ago, and he has been a model employee. And it's just fostered our relationship and our partner, not only with me and that member, but me and that company, him and that company. And it's just been and there was a lot of personal things that happened for him during this process that, that I can't speak of. But again, it just shows that sometimes these grievances are not as bloody as people would think they are, and they do have happy endings.
Yeah, I think that's something to, a lot of times, or we're seeing Starbucks really go to the mat against their workers, and I think that the degree to which workers being happy on the job can improve their performance, can improve worker morale. The idea that workers feel like they're being taken care of, that they're respected, that they're valued as partners, as members of the team. I think that management, bosses, executives, and people just kind of out in the world, they really underestimate that as a driver of performance and of the employee, and then as a result of that, of the company.
Yep. And most people think unions are formed just to get people more money, and that's not always the case. I mean, compensation is like third or fourth on the priority list for most workers. And then the other thing that we've got going right now is support for organized labor is really high, right at 70%, I think. So, yeah, it's a unique environment. I hope it continues to move in that direction. I think that's how the middle class grows. And but it's not always about the money. It is about the respect. It's about stability. It's about being able to have a life outside of your job, not being a slave to your employer. And a lot of people beat up whatever the youngest generation is at that time, a lot of people beat up on that generation. But this young generation we're seeing now, they have a lot of, they're passionate about having a life outside of their work. I guess that's just the broadest way that I can put that.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm certainly not interested myself in being a slave to my job. You know, I want enough money that I can be comfortable. And after that, I'm not really interested in making even, $200, $300, $400, $1 million a year. Like, I want to make enough money that I can go on vacation every now and then I want to spend as much of my time as possible doing whatever the hell I want. And that's the big thing that I like about, that unions can support. And having a good union job is that I have plenty of time off and with good compensation. And that's the thing that's important to me. And I think that's, like you said, that's something that's really important, especially to younger people. Because, I think that folks nowadays are seeing the importance maybe of that work-life balance in a way that hasn't always been the case.
Yeah. Yeah. And, unions were primarily formed based off of the fact that people were working 7 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day, very dangerous, deadly jobs. And so with this growth of Americans accepting and favoring unions, it's kind of like we're getting back to our ground game of the late 1800s.
Right. I think so. Tony, I appreciate your time. If anybody is interested if they're a non-union electrician, if they are somebody that's only been in it a few years and maybe they want to do an apprenticeship, or maybe they're a local coffee worker and they're like, oh, well, maybe I want to unionize with the IBEW. How do they get in contact with y'all?
Very easy. We are, you can Google us, and our number's 256-383-2279. We are on Facebook. It's just IBEW 558. And we are very easy to get in touch with, and we're willing to help everybody we can help.
Absolutely. And of course, you'll be able to hear his phone number on our ads, on the ads that they've got playing on our program. IBEW 558 is a sponsor of the program, and we appreciate y'all's support. Tony, thank you for your time. Holler at me if you ever have any good stories for us, okay?
All right. Thank you so much, Jacob. Y'all have a great day.
All right, man.
Thanks,
too.
Tony.
Bye. Bye-bye. All right, folks, that was Tony Quillen. He is business manager of IBEW Local 558, president of the State Electrical Workers, president of the North Alabama Building Trades. You heard how you can get in touch with him, so do that if you are interested in joining the union or unionizing your workplace.
Or if you're an educator and you're talking to young people, if you work in a community college, something like that.
If you're a high school teacher, if you're a tech teacher, definitely reach out to them for that. That way, I think that's so important. Even I think that, college is something that's been pushed on young people to an unhealthy degree, and I think we're starting to move away from that a little bit. But even as we move away from that, the trade unions are not being emphasized to the degree that they should be.
Yeah, certainly not here in Alabama. So
certainly not here in Alabama.
So yeah, anytime I have an opportunity, I'm going to throw that out there that we need more partnerships between our schools and our trade union apprenticeship programs, because these are opportunities for young people to go to work and be treated with dignity, to have the compensation and benefits that they need to really get started as a young adult out here in the workforce and raise a family. Yeah. And so, if you know some people who are at a career transition phase or they just graduated high school, just left, hey, steer them this way. See if this is an opportunity they would be interested in, because it could be, a game changer for them.
And you heard him, starting wages is $15 an hour with benefits.
While you're learning.
While you're learning.
So that's great.
And then you start at $30 an hour, $30-something an hour as a journeyman with those benefits, with 3 pensions, with health care, with a grievance procedure, with a procedure that you can be reinstated if you've been unfairly terminated, with back pay. I mean, just so many benefits that you are not going to get. And this is another thing we didn't touch on. He touched on it briefly. The IBEW is the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. International. Across the United States and Canada, they've got locals there. And what does that mean? That means if work dries up for some reason, which we're not anticipating that, obviously, with the way that North Alabama is moving. But let's just say it does. In 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years, something happens, work dries up in North Alabama. Well, there's going to be work somewhere else.
Right.
And you can fill one of those jobs.
Or maybe you're interested in leaving.
Maybe you're interested in leaving and going and working, traveling somewhere else. You can't do that with some local podunk non-union contractor.
Yeah.
It's just not there. It's just not there. The opportunities that you've got to maintain a job is just not there with some non-union local contractor. And Tony said in the chat, he said, we actually do several visits to schools in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Love to hear that, Tony. And maybe we can get one of those teachers on the program to talk to us about how their students receive that at some point. That would be really great. Covering 800,000 workers across North America. And yes, you can work through the entire country as an IBEW member. That's such a huge benefit. I mean, having that to fall back on in a time of recession that, and obviously, look, you don't want to move. A lot of times, a lot of people don't want to move. They don't want to uproot their lives. But that is something that union members, that trade union members can fall back on. That as a non-union electrician, you don't have that to fall back on. You just don't. The idea that there's going to be a job somewhere for you in the country. So we appreciate Tony.
Good stuff from Tony,
good stuff,
for sure.
Good stuff. We're going to take a break, and we will be right back. Don't change the channel. This is the Valley Labor Report.
Energy Alabama supports consumers and is a leader in advocating for them. We have been able to successfully fight off utility rate increases in the state, reduce fees for electric vehicles, increase electric vehicle infrastructure spending, and secured a $100 million refund by Alabama Power after the utility overcharged customers for fuel. To learn more about our work advocating for customers and join the fight, go to energyalabama.org.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBEW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBEW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBEW558.org.
North Alabama DSA is looking for folks to work for a better North Alabama. They prioritize mutual aid, municipal activism, and union solidarity. Contact them on social media or dsanorthalabama@gmail for more information.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at IAMAW44.org.
Hometown Action is a grassroots organization building a multiracial working class movement for racial, gender, economic, and environmental justice in Alabama's rural communities. We stand in solidarity with Alabama workers and are proud to support the Valley Labor Report's efforts to inform and build the Southern worker movement. Please visit hometownaction.org and follow our social media channels at Hometown Action to learn more about how you too can get involved to make the South a better place for all workers. Solidarity, y'all.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth to go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Just got off the line with Tony Quillen, business manager of the IBEW Local 558, talking about the union, talking about the kind of work that they do, the kind of benefits that they have, how you can get involved. If you missed that, don't worry, you can find us online. We're on YouTube and Facebook, and you can go back and watch the full show or clips throughout the week. So make sure that you're following us there. A few weeks ago, we talked about abortion rights and how they are not only a culture war issue, which it's been turned into a culture war kind of issue, but they're also an essential bread and butter economic issue for women in this country. There were a couple good articles about that a few weeks ago that we've been wanting to get to, and we just been running out of time. So this one from Aisha Banerjee in These Times lays out some really good stuff. Quoting from the article, some of the economic consequences of being denied an abortion include a higher chance of being in poverty even 4 years after, a lower likelihood of being employed full-time, and an increase in unpaid debts and financial distress lasting years. Laws that restrict abortion providers, so-called TRAP laws, which are targeted regulation of abortion providers, have led women in those states to being less likely to move into higher-paying occupations. On the flip side, environments where abortion is legal and accessible have lower rates of teen first births and marriages. Abortion legalization has also been associated with reduced maternal mortality for Black women. The ability to delay having a child has been found to translate to significantly increased wages and labor earnings, especially among Black women, as well as increased likelihood of educational attainment. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen concluded that eliminating the rights of women to make decisions about when and whether to have children would have very damaging effects on the economy and would set women back decades. Alito, in his draft ruling, anticipates this argument, saying that, there's a crucial difference between now and when Roe was decided that makes it not as bad that we as the state could be forcing women to carry a pregnancy to term, which is the FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act. Harold Meyerson points out in the American Prospect that in the states where trigger laws have already been passed banning or restricting abortion as soon as Alito's Screed becomes the law of the land, and in other Republican-run states now crafting anti-choice diktats, however, the very idea of paid leave, which is important, the FMLA only guarantees unpaid leave. The idea of paid leave remains anathema. In South Dakota, where Republican Governor Kristi Noem has repeatedly shown she will do anything to slither up the Republican rights list of vice presidential candidates, the legislature passed and Noem signed a law last year forbidding cities and counties from enacting paid family leave ordinances of their own, lest some bomb-throwing Sioux Falls malcontents think they can sneak a fast one past Kristi. Just imagine, like the state government is coming in and telling cities, you can't, with your budget, give women time off if they have children.
Very reminiscent of Alabama. And when we saw the
minimum wage, yeah.
Absolutely, raise the wage movement stopped in its tracks after some success in Birmingham.
Yeah. It's
funny how small government works that way.
It's insane. And these are the people that want the state to force you to carry a pregnancy to term. They're the very same people that are stopping us from supporting mothers economically and socially. These are the people that are stopping those things from happening.
Right. Don't tell me you're pro-family values and you can't even support paid family leave. That should be, that should be like the basic qualification.
I worked in a restaurant for 3 years, and there was a woman there who had a baby. She worked a double, and the next day she gave birth. And it wasn't that she was early. She worked right until she gave birth, and she was back 2 or 3 days later because she didn't have paid leave. She couldn't afford to take time off to be with her new baby. And
that just shouldn't happen in the wealthiest country on earth.
And it especially shouldn't happen if you believe that the state should force women to carry a pregnancy to term. If you believe that we should that we should be governed by the religious ideas that you've got in your head, you should at least soften the blow for people. But that was a choice that she made. She didn't have to do that. She made that choice. She wanted a baby. And so she did that. But Alabama wants to create a state where women are forced to do that against their will and still not have that support. It's one thing to go down this path knowing you're not going to have support from the state and doing it anyway. It's another to be forced by the state to go down this path with the knowledge that the state isn't gonna protect you. It's so frustrating. Back to the article. So it's in the states where women will be compelled to carry pregnancies to term that many of those women and their families will be on their own financially from the moment the child emerges from the sanctity of the womb into the hardscrabble penury of life outside, and from the fervent defense of the pro-life movement into its utter indifference to life post-womb. It's so frustrating. But I mean, this isn't, unless you think that we are, the American Prospect and these Times Magazine, these are liberal outlets. These are radical liberal outlets. I think that you, Jake, and these people in these other outlets are misrepresenting what pro-life people stand for. Lest you think that, let's play this clip from this station where they talk about the financial distress that women will have to face if they're forced to carry a pregnancy to term. Let's play that.
And then lastly, The idea that we should not overturn Roe v. Wade because people might have to figure out child care and time off from work and the price of gas. My God. Don't parents already figure that stuff out? Haven't they been figuring that stuff out from time immemorial? I mean, from the beginning of time, Adam and Eve, didn't they have to figure out what to do with child care? I would suspect they did. So Dalton Johnson, you're a knucklehead. And the very idea that you're just trying to protect your revenue-producing option there at the healthcare clinic for women in Huntsville, I mean, all you're doing is just trying to preserve your revenue stream. You're not overly worried about the women and the price of gas and the child care. And, oh, this is awful. This is going to be bad.
Do you hear that?
Just contempt.
Just total contempt for these people that are gonna have to do that. I mean, seriously, the way that the price of gas, and also literally the next day he's gonna go on and talk about how the price of gas is a total problem. But when we're talking about when people that he perceives as on a different side are saying, oh yeah, like the price of gas is a problem. What he's responding to there is a clip from the director of a women's clinic in Huntsville talking about how if you force women to give birth, the price of gas is an issue. I just filled up yesterday, $75. That's an issue, right? And the price of gas, inflation, having to pay bills for a child that you don't want to have. That's an issue. And that's an issue that people should be concerned about. And that's an issue that he is fear-mongering about on a daily basis. But when we bring it up in this context, he literally mocks it. He said, the price of gas. Yeah. I mean, seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it didn't really matter to him. I believe he has children, but I'm sure he was financially well off enough to where maybe it wasn't a big issue. But as a working class father, and I know many of our listeners have children and grandchildren of their own, we know how expensive it is to raise a child. Mm-hmm. We know how expensive it is to get diapers. Right now, you're lucky if you can even find baby formula for your child.
Right.
And of course, the older they get, the more cost you have in terms of activities, in terms of education. You know, we don't have universal pre-K here in Alabama. We have a great state pre-K program, but it's not accessible to everyone. So, you know, childcare, you're lucky if you can get childcare, you know, for $500 a month, maybe a lot more than that. So yeah, the economic costs are absolutely a factor in deciding to have a child. I mean, we all know people in our lives who've decided to have no children or to have less children because they can't afford it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Ben, we've got a caller on the line that we're going to bring on. If you could make sure that we're going to be able to get that out over the radio. But the blasé attitude towards the plight of women isn't contained just to our own local Koch-funded talker. Let's take a look at Louisiana, where U.S. Senator Bill Cassidy said if you don't count black women, our maternal mortality rate isn't that bad.
Golly.
As if black women are not Louisianans. Quote, about a third of our population is African American. African Americans have a higher incidence of maternal mortality. So if you correct our population for race, we're not as much an outlier as it would otherwise appear. Like, dude, black women are just as much citizens of your state as white women. They count. You can't just take them out.
That's a very revealing comment.
It is a very revealing comment. In addition to economics, you've of course got the health effects. From another article in These Times by Miriam Markowitz, quote, there are the obvious adverse effects such as weight gain and hypertension, as well as preterm birth and ectopic pregnancies. Gestational diabetes is likely to reappear as regular diabetes later in life. Preeclampsia brings increased risk of kidney disease, heart disease, thromboembolism, hypothyroidism, and impaired memory. A pregnant person should prepare for the possibility of anemia, urinary tract infections, and mood disorders before and after birth. This list is far from comprehensive and likely to grow longer. Severe maternal morbidity is rising along with mortality and now affects between 50,000 and 60,000 people in the United States every year. In other words, going into labor carries a 1 in 60 risk of health effects as serious as a heart attack or a hysterectomy. Lots of women make this choice to become pregnant and give birth willingly. Lots of people do. But it should always be a choice, not the enforcement by armed agents of the states to enforce the ideas that religious zealots have in their heads. Like if you believe that a fetus is a life, I'm not going to tell you can't believe that, obviously, but you can't make me believe that, and you can't enforce that idea because that's just an idea that you have in your head. That's just your religion. You cannot force the idea on people and force them to carry a pregnancy to term. It's just not right. It's just not right. It's so frustrating that the people that are going to do this are the people that make it the most difficult for women to get support when they do give birth. Let's bring that caller on the air. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from? Hello?
Yes. Is this me?
Yes, it is.
Well, I just wanted to call in and ask about something else. Then I heard y'all make mention of the fella in Louisiana. Who's that again?
U.S. Senator Bill Cassidy was who we mentioned.
Wow. Well, number one, I'd like to point out the fact he's from Wisconsin.
He's actually from Wisconsin?
I think so. I think he's a carpetbagger, yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Well, we've got a carpetbagger here in Alabama. Tommy Tuberville lives in Florida or something.
Yep. I don't know. I just think that from a historical materialist lens, we have to. Did I get disconnected?
No. I can still hear you. And by the way, what was your name and where you're calling from?
Strom McCallum from Charleston, South Carolina.
Okay, thank
you. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think from a historical materialist lens, we really have to begin destroying these conceptions of racial communities and bring together people as proletarians. We have to overcome these capitalist cultural hegemonic means. And the problem is like, you'll see a lot of people who describe Southerners and they only mean white Southerners. They don't mean our black neighbors. And I think that, we really have to emancipate people from these narrow definitions of community if we want to build a larger international conception of people as proletarians. I think it really begins with destroying lines within communities of people whose ancestors have lived side by side for centuries, probably. So, yeah.
I appreciate the call. Thank you. And I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
And I think that's something thank you for your call, Strom. I appreciate it, Strom from South Carolina. And that's, I think that's something that the labor movement is able to do really well, is able to bring people together across race and gender lines to fight for the same thing, to fight for each other, to humanize each other. One of my favorite interviews over the years that we've been doing this has been a couple of nurses from Pennsylvania. One of them was a conservative and one of them was a liberal. And the conservative fellow said, I never realized that liberals were like so human, so much like me or something, and I think that, being in a union with people, being in the same community with people is really helpful in in humanizing people and in helping us to understand that these are that these are our people. They're the same as us, and whatever people want to do to try to divide us, a lot of it is going to be artificial.
Right, absolutely. And I think, to Strom's point, there's a lot invested in keeping us divided along racial lines, gender lines, religious lines. But, we have a common humanity that we have to focus on. We have to recognize each other's differences and the different types of oppression that people face because of who they are and what they are. But we can acknowledge those things and address those things while still building solidarity across those lines and organizing along those common interests. And to your point, Jacob, I think that's the promise of the labor movement. We don't always live up to that promise, but I think that's the potential that we have. And that's what we have to do if we're going to make a difference, considering the scale of crises that we face, from inequality to climate change to attacks on rights of basically every kind. I think that's what we have to do, is addition, not subtraction, and just keep building a movement that is diverse and that reflects those common interests that we have as workers and as human beings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I did want to mention, as we're wrapping up here, we are going to be going to Labor Notes here in a couple weeks. The Labor Notes convention in Chicago is in Chicago from June 17 to June 19. Registration is closed now, so if you haven't registered, unfortunately, it's a bit late. But if you have registered and you are in Alabama or en route to Chicago, and you need a ride, let us know. We have one seat open in the Valley Labor Report Mobile going to Chicago. It's going to be a lot of fun. It
will be a lot of fun. We'll have plenty to report back on, and we may have a list of guests to pull from for the next couple years. Looking over that conference agenda. Amazon Labor Union, the Starbucks organizers, John Deere strikers, Minneapolis striking teachers, you name it, any high profile and low profile just about labor struggle that you've remotely heard of over the past year or two, chances are they're going to be at this conference.
Yeah, definitely. And they're going to have meetings for workers in every different sector, federal workers, teachers, healthcare workers to get
stagehands
to get together and think about, how can we organize better? How can we come together? How can we support each other as we're organizing in these different industries? I am facilitating a panel discussion on organizing the South. I'm just extremely excited about it. It's going to be a lot of fun.
We're going to get to meet some of our guests.
Bernie Sanders is speaking in person at it. Did you see that,
I
Adam?
did not know that.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
They just announced that yesterday. Bernie Sanders is going to be there in person.
But I have noticed a lot of familiar names on the agenda. Some of the people that have actually been on this show, whether they're authors or organizers, Zach Patton, our Longshore brother from the West Coast, is going to be there. Max Alvarez, Kim Kelly. So a lot of the folks that we've had the pleasure of interviewing over the years will get a chance to actually meet in person and attend some of their workshops. So really, really looking forward to it. And I think that's hopefully going to inspire us and a whole lot of other people to do some good work coming out of it.
Yeah, I hope so. Folks, that is going to be it for us on the radio today. Just a reminder, if you want to support the program, leave us a voicemail. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can buy a hat or give us money on our website, tvlr.fm. Find us online right now, where we're going to be talking about some national labor stories and chatting with Matt Lech and David Griscom of Left Reckoning about Joe Rogan and Elon Musk and Joe Byron. Gonna be a lot of fun. Find us online, and you can still call into the show and talk to us in overtime. So find us online, keep watching the show. Until then, we'll see you next week. All power to the workers. All right. We're off the radio now. Got rid of those folks on the radio. Howdy. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for staying with us. We got a great overtime lined up. Like I said, we got Matt Lech and David Griscom coming on the line. You can still call in. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We're going to take a short break, and we will be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
on Alabama's only Union Talk radio program, and we've got some good stuff. Google Map workers win big after just threatening to strike. We're going to be spotting corporate plants with Matt Lech and David Griscom. Microsoft has an interesting announcement and more. So let's just jump into this first story about Microsoft. They came out with an interesting announcement last week. Dave Jamieson, labor reporter for Huffington Post, said that this statement on Twitter, he said that this statement, while careful, hints that Microsoft will not respond as aggressively as other corporations have to unionization efforts, and that the company is even potentially open to voluntary recognition. So that's really interesting. One of the things that they said in the statements is, in many instances, employee unionization proposals may open an opportunity for Microsoft to work with an existing union on agreed-upon processes for employees to exercise their rights through a private agreement. So that's interesting. There's reason to be skeptical, though, because a boss is a boss is a boss. In response to this announcement on Twitter, some people shared their own employers' attempts to use private election agreements to get them to give up their right to strike before they even get to the negotiating table.
Wow.
Like, as a condition of accepting card check, I'm going to sign a no strike clause.
Yeah, I think folks under the Microsoft umbrella would have to be really, really careful about that and ask, why is the company taking this approach? Maybe it's as simple as they don't want some of the bad PR that Amazon and Starbucks and Activision have been receiving because of public opinion. As we've mentioned a couple times today, public opinion's at an all-time high for the labor movement. Obviously, the people are on our side. They're on the side of the workers organizing in those particular companies that are being so egregious. So maybe it's a PR move with Microsoft. I mean, their most famous person they're associated with is Bill Gates, who obviously has had some PR issues the last few years. So maybe that's it. But I think you just shared something that's very important. They're not doing this for no reason.
Right.
And be careful what that reason could be.
Connor Lewis also mentioned, Connor Lewis on Twitter, editor at the labor journalism collective Strike Wave, he mentioned that there could be a benefit to be had by the companies by taking the election mechanism out of the hands of the NLRB when you have an aggressive pro-worker NLRB like we have right now, or at least a relatively so aggressive and pro-worker NLRB, because you could, if you agree to to this election agreement, well, then you take the enforcement mechanism out of the hands of the NLRB and you put it in some private mediator, some private arbitrator, some private panel or something that the boss maybe chooses and that maybe you agree to, but maybe you didn't realize how pro-boss they are. And so,
yeah, if the boss is offering you a shortcut to your union, you should be suspect.
Be suspect. I wouldn't say this is bad. This is maybe better than neutral news is about what I would.
I think they wouldn't have said this if it weren't for the power that we see surging across the labor movement right now. And like I said, the bad press that these companies are getting from their anti-union tactics. So, I think you could take it as sort of a positive thing, the fact that they even bothered to issue this statement at all. The workers that are specifically involved will definitely have to tread carefully.
Definitely. Definitely hope that some Microsoft workers see this and reach out to CWA or something. That would be great. Let's take a look at some of the comments that we didn't get to read in the YouTube chat. Ron M says, it seems we're happy to spend federal funds on projects which result in death and destruction while underfunding agencies which protect workers. And definitely, and to a degree that is difficult to understand. Like I mentioned, the NLRB the EEOC, these things are minuscule in light of the whole size of the national budget. Why would you not fund them more?
Right. Compare the budget of the EEOC or the NLRB or the DOL to, I don't know, the F-35 program. Or look at the contracts that Boeing and Raytheon and Lockheed get compared to these very important federal agencies.
Yeah. Jeb M says that Jeb, he's a business manager for the Ironworkers, another sponsor of the show. He said that Tony has led the biggest labor negotiations in North Alabama. That's very cool. Mr. Anderson says that need more stories with happy endings. I think he was responding there to the grievance story there.
That's a good point. Yeah, we should try to share some more wins, especially those kind of individual grievances, because obviously on this show we focus more on the collective than the individual, but unions are made up of individuals who join together, and individuals often join the union for that benefit and protection. So yeah, I have a few victories under my belt that I still think about and still makes me happy. Some of those wins that we got for individual workers.
Yeah, maybe let's talk about those sometime. Mr. Anderson also says people want to live, not work till they drop. Indeed. Jeb says another bonus is that trade union contractors typically build the largest and most iconic landmarks in the United States, which is true. A lot of our members chase these glory jobs so that they can say, yeah, I helped build that.
Yeah, that's really cool.
One of the things that the Ironworkers commercial says on America's Workforce is that they built things like the Freedom Tower in New York on top of Ground Zero. They built the Golden Gate Bridge or something. Glory jobs tend to go to union contractors, so that is pretty cool to be able to drive by some big skyline altering construction project and be like, hey, I helped build that. That's pretty cool.
I mean, I even know just from my brief experience as a stagehand, the satisfaction you get from seeing it. Like when I saw the pictures of the Dave Matthews concert or Kenny Chesney concert. I'm not a fan of Kenny Chesney, but man, we did a pretty good job setting up all those lights, I have to say. And it makes you feel proud to know that you contributed to that and that you were part of a team. And that's one of the great things about that kind of work.
Right. Mr. Anderson says these politicians do not believe in local governance, talking about the barring of South Dakota cities from enacting a paid maternity leave. Mr. Anderson also says Japan gives maternity leave for fathers. I think it would be called paternity leave in that case. But yes, I have paternity leave. I work for the federal government, and I will get 12 weeks of paid leave, I believe.
Yeah, I was lucky that when my daughter was born, I had a union contract at the time that guaranteed parental leave for fathers. And yeah, it was a great benefit to have. Shamefully, I had more leave available than my wife did, who actually, did the hard work of giving birth. But that's the difference between a union contract and not having one.
Wow. Jason Wintermeyer says child care tax credit, talking about some things that people could do to help support women, folks who have children. Indeed, that's something, and that's amazing that the Democrats let that pass. It just doesn't make any sense. Jeb says in response to Strom's call, the only war is class war. Strom hit it out of the park. Solidarity, brother. Indeed, only war is class war. That's right. Strom says in the chat after he got off the phone, post-age of discovery, race ideology is a tool for the division of the exploited and the organization of capitalist production. Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. William Pina, a union is the most effective anti-racist program. Absolutely.
And there's actual research to prove that.
And we've talked about that research with you can go back, and this is an old clip, and so the audio isn't as good, but Jake Grombach, researcher from the University of Washington, talked about that with us. Jeb M says post-Civil War Reconstruction embedded that division into the Southern proletariat class for the Northern capitalists to exploit, and it still continues. Indeed. Great show today. Jeb says, hate to leave. Good company, but got to dip. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Strom says, I was wrong. Bill Cassidy is from Illinois, not Wisconsin. And Jeb says, Ironworkers 477 built that amphitheater. Very cool. That's awesome. I didn't know that.
They did a great job. They did a great job. And IATSE 900 loves working on it.
Yeah. I'm really excited to go to a concert there. Looking forward to being able to do that. Another win that happened last week is that Google Maps workers won a huge victory. They said on Twitter, today the Google Maps contract workers informed management that they plan to go on strike due to unsafe working conditions imposed by the June 6th return to office date. In less than 3 hours, workers won a 90-day extension. This is the power of organizing. That is awesome. In 3 hours. And this is interesting because the Alphabet Workers Union is a project of the CWA that is very, very interesting. It is a wall-to-wall union for Alphabet workers and Alphabet contractors. They recently did win a union election, but they haven't done a union election in very many places, and I don't think they're the official bargaining representative of the Google Maps contract workers. So to be able to do that without an NLRB recognized union, and definitely without a contract, they definitely don't have a contract yet. I know that for sure. That's amazing, and that is what people should be doing as they're trying to organize their workplace. Is they should be acting like they're a union already, being a union already, because you are a union already, and you can still win even if you haven't had your election yet.
Right, absolutely. I mean, yeah, that's a great example. They organized and produced a victory, and it took 3 hours for the boss to figure it out.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so if you're in a workplace where there's no union and you don't even see a union on the horizon, that doesn't mean you can't organize there in your workplace. That doesn't mean you can't actually win some victories, because there's strength in numbers. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's the key, you know. There's somebody there that you work with that you can connect with. And all right, now you have two. Now you've got the basis of a committee. Keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hit this one more story before we bring on David and Matt. They're coming on at 11:30.
From Left Reckoning. For those of you not familiar with those guys, great guys, fellow Southerners. And
David is. Matt
right.
is from North Dakota.
Right. Okay. You know, so not a Southerner, but very much a rural area. I think he could probably relate in some ways. But Left Reckoning is a really cool show, and they've been very gracious to us and had us on as guests. So definitely appreciate them coming on.
Yeah. So inflation continues to be an issue. I filled up my car yesterday, $75. I do not have like a big truck. It's just, it's a sedan. $75. And the Biden administration seems dead set on taking a conservative path to ending inflation, raising interest rates. So what does that do? What is actually, we've been hearing about this, and this is actually, we talk about this a lot at my work, because the projects that I work on are financed projects with 25, 30-year terms. And so when you're talking about 25, 30-year term on a contract, and you're talking about increasing the interest rate by 0.5%, that's a really big deal. And for a lot of our projects are just kind of like, they just break even. So this is a really big concern at my workplace. And so what does it do? Well, like I just told you, I mean, I experienced this directly on my job. It's going to kill investment. And that's the goal. And that's the outcome, is it will kill investment, because money will cost more to borrow, which will kill job openings and lower wages. I mean, it's just not good. It's
yeah. I mean, and look, there's a whole another debate about the cheap easy money that has been flowing from the Federal Reserve for, I don't know, at this point, like over a decade, and the ways in which corporations have been able to get this cheap money, and they are so leveraged up to their eyeballs in this debt. Those are all valid debates and conversations, but if you look at what's going to happen to ordinary people as these interest rates are raised, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a good thing for us. Historically, pretty much every time they've raised up rates to supposedly tackle inflation, it inevitably results in a recession. Mm-hmm. We see less job openings. We see wages go down. Is this actually going to fix inflation? I don't think it will, because you're not even addressing the major factors behind the inflation. You might cool off the housing market, because now regular people like us, it's going to be so much more expensive to get a mortgage.
Right.
Maybe some of the speculation in housing goes down a little bit as it gets more expensive. Maybe that prices out some of these speculators, because, in Huntsville, just as across the country, we're seeing a lot of out-of-state companies and out-of-state investors scooping up properties, and people are being priced out of their own backyards. And so, we'll see if it has any effect on that part of the economy. But in general, I don't see how this is going to fix inflation, but I do see how it's going to probably kick off a recession.
Yeah. I mean, we're, just in my job, we're talking about projects potentially not being able to go through. And what does that mean? That means the projects the projects that I work on are huge multi-million-dollar projects. I've got like 10 of these that are looking at being awarded in the next couple of years. And that's going to be a total of potentially like $100 million. A lot of that would go into workers' pockets. Some of it would go into material, and some of it's going to go into other stuff, but that's going to go to jobs too. And we're looking at having to kill some of these projects. It's just really, really not good. And so from an article in MR Online by Ben Norton, in a press conference on May the 4th, Powell announced that the Fed would be raising interest rates by 0.5% and implemented policies aimed at reducing inflation in the United States, which is at its highest level in 40 years. According to a transcript of the presser published by the Wall Street Journal, Powell blamed this inflation crisis, which is global, not on the proxy war in Ukraine and Western sanctions on Russia, but rather on U.S. workers supposedly making too much money.
Wow.
This is the Biden Fed chair. Employers are having difficulties filling job openings, and wages are rising at the fastest pace in many years, Powell complained. The Fed's proposal bring down wages. And that's what that's a quote from him, is that we want to bring wages down. The theory behind why this is necessary is basically that Biden administration is buying the conservative argument about inflation. Support for working people during the pandemic has caused the market to be too favorable to workers, and so they need to correct that balance.
Y'all feeling that? Y'all feeling how favorable it is?
It doesn't make any sense, because inflation is the same here as it is in Europe at about 8%. If U.S. policies are to blame, why is it that our inflation rates are identical?
Right. And why is that inflation rate not matching the rate of increase of wages? Right? If inflation's 8% and it's all because of us working people getting more crumbs from the table, you would think wages have risen by 8%, but they haven't.
Yeah. And
it's about 4%, right?
Right.
Is my understanding. Well, so we're looking at about 4% wage gains, but 8% inflation. And somehow, somehow it's all our fault as working people because we got a child tax credit or because we got, a bonus check here and there.
Because the real drivers of inflation are obviously global. Energy inflation is actually a bit lower here than in Europe. 30% here to 40% in Europe, largely because of the war in Ukraine and production not having ramped up to pre-pandemic levels because oil is sold on a global market. So, they're not getting their oil from Russia right now. Europe isn't. So they're having to buy from our suppliers of oil, which is pushing our oil prices up.
Which pushes the price up of
other
everything
goods.
else
Right.
that gets transported through oil, which is virtually anything you're going to buy.
Supply chain issues, production shocks. David Dayen in the American Prospect reports that even among like the academic economist people who say that not the conservative talk radio propagandists, but the real economists, even among the people that say that pandemic relief measures are somewhat to blame, it's not more than 1 or 2%. And yet somehow among the conservative corporate media, and for some reason, the Biden administration, a reigning idea is that workers' wages are too high and we need to be put in check. And that's and Robert Kuttner points out in the American Prospect, exactly like you said, Adam, that the latest job report really puts this idea to bed if you care to take a look. Wages have only risen half as fast as inflation.
And by the way, not to get too off topic here, but that's one of the reasons why when I saw Alabama just celebrating this, huge teacher pay raise, I it's not that I was trying to downplay it, but it was a 4% raise across the board. Inflation's 8%. I'm not a math major, but I can figure that out. So, now there were some really important gains in terms of restructuring the salary matrix and increasing steps and that sort of thing. So I don't want to take away from that victory. But, if your employer is giving you a 4% raise while prices are rising at 8% or more, are you really gaining ground there?
Mm-hmm. Right. And Joe Marshall in the Facebook chat said, isn't Powell a Trump appointee? And he was a Trump appointee, but he was just confirmed a couple of weeks ago on May.
Yeah, Biden reappointed him.
Biden reappointed him.
And so I can only take that as a vote of confidence from the Biden administration that they support the direction they're going in. Means Morning News had a great segment this week, I believe on Wednesday, where they actually played some footage from one of Biden's economic advisors, who's more or less saying the same thing that you're hearing from Chair Powell. And in this case, the Biden White House was sort of putting it out there that, the labor market's so tight that we have room to do this. Because the question from the reporter was, how confident are you that the Fed can raise these interest rates and somehow, and that this is going to help inflation, but not put us into a recession?
Yeah.
Can't say the answer impressed me.
It's just so...
And the political aspect to this is all happening as you're facing midterm elections in November.
Right.
That already look pretty bad, given the layout, given which offices are up for election in terms of on the Senate side. And if you look at approval ratings for Congress, approval ratings for Biden and the Biden administration and Democrats more broadly, and the historic trend that midterms after a new administration typically go to the opposition party, all signs point to bad November results for the Democrats. That's not inevitable, but again, I'm not an expert here, but my guess would be if we start seeing a recession, if we see the labor market collapse, if we see folks still paying higher at the grocery store and at the gas pump while the job market actually starts to dry up, how does this help you win an election in November? I don't know. It feels like they're doing things. It feels like they're taking actions that they know will get their ass kicked at the polls. Now, maybe they think that's the right thing to do for the American people, but it is very mind-boggling when you look at this and consider that they are almost certainly going to lose control of Congress. It's just, sad. It's sad, and, I've been told by many people that Joe Biden, he's the most pro-labor president we've ever had. he's going to be a new FDR, blah, blah, blah. And I think we've tried to be very fair on this show and highlight some things that have been good, particularly the NLRB. And there have been some proposals that were positive. They haven't gone anywhere. But all in all, I mean, you can't tell me this is it's hard to convince me how pro-labor this administration is when their economic policy seems geared towards the same kind of conservative economic policies that we would hear from the other party.
Right. Yeah. It's difficult to understand. Definitely really difficult to understand. Have we got David and Matt on the line now? I think we have Matt on the line. David, not yet, but Matt does appear to be in here with us. Let's go ahead and bring him on.
Sure thing. Appreciate everyone listening. Appreciate your patience, especially as you wait for me to figure things out, because as you've learned, I'm not a professional.
Yeah, so Matt Lech and David Griscom host Left Reckoning. It's a program on YouTube. I'm sure they do a podcast and everything as well. We've been on it a few times. They do some really good stuff. Definitely enjoy listening to them. And Matt Lech is also a producer on The Majority Report. David Griscom has writing in a lot of different places. He was also a producer, I believe, on The Michael Brooks Show, as was Matt Lech. So really, really enjoy listening to them. Matt, appreciate you coming on the program.
Yeah, howdy, fellas. Happy to be spending the Saturday afternoon with you guys.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's 12:30 over there.
It is 12:31 in Brooklyn, New York. Yeah.
It is officially afternoon over there. So, we were going to get David to talk to us some about Texas. So while we wait for him to get on the line,
he's on his way. He's coming in. We're working on it.
Yeah. He was out late at the honky tonk last night. You know.
Oh man, that doesn't surprise me at all.
I wonder if we have any union honky tonks, or if that's a thing out there. We
should make that happen. We should make that happen. Maybe we can get. I guess the closest thing that we would have to a honky tonk here would be like Sammy T's.
Oh,
is that a honky tonk?
What's Sammy T's?
No, not quite. No, no.
You don't think so?
No. I'm wondering, maybe up in Nashville though. Maybe up in Nashville there's some unionized honky tonks.
That sounds nice.
Could be. It sounds like we got David on the line. David, appreciate you jumping on.
Hey, how are y'all doing?
Doing good. So, Adam is working on getting getting everything set up visually. So actually, let's take a break really quick. Why don't we do that? Why don't we take a break really quick, Adam, while we get that sorted out?
Sure.
All right, folks.
Good.
We'll be right back with David and Matt.
Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. We'll be back. We promise.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
When just for welcome back. This is the Valley Labor Report. We are on with Matt Lech and David Griscom. Folks, thanks for joining. I appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, same.
So I wanted to start off with David, if you could talk to us some about Texas. Y'all have a lot of stuff happening over there. The first Texas Starbucks workers won an election. You, of course, had the horrible massacre over there. You've been writing a lot about what Abbott has been doing with the COVID stuff. You know, people talk about COVID tyranny, and Abbott has actually been doing some COVID tyranny. So just talk to us about what is going on in Texas right now.
Well, I mean, there's a hell of a lot. I mean, first off, shout out to 45th and Lamar here in Austin for winning their union election. I think it was 10-1, which is pretty exciting. I think there's 10 more stores coming down the pipeline too. I mean, I guess maybe I could start with Abbott and we could, zoom out from there, because all of these things sort of touch on what's been happening in the state for the past 20 years. Where once the Democratic Party completely imploded, the state has been controlled de facto by the Republican Party, right? And it's been like 22 years. And in a state like Texas, that really matters, just in the sense that Texas's constitution was set up to have a weak governor. So, we don't have to debate whether or not Texas is a southern state or not, but it does have this big difference from a lot of other southern states, where it does sort of have that kind of Western populism, where like the legislature has tremendous amounts of power and the executive branch is really, really weak. And the governor has always been really weak in Texas historically. So like, unlike a lot of other states, like they don't get to select their own cabinet. All of those kind of executive functions are appointed by the governor on like a staggered basis. So they're like a council, or they're just straight up statewide election. But what's happened is because after the Democratic Party started to completely fall apart here, the Republican Party has been in power for so long that everybody who is in the executive branch is basically a loyalist. And this got really strong under Rick Perry. And then Greg Abbott, who is just like, people don't know him. Like, this is a guy who is, paralyzed because he got hit with a tree when he was a young lawyer, sued the homeowner and the tree company for something like 22 million plus, right? And when he got into power in Texas, he basically capped the amount of non-medical damages that somebody could receive for a personal injury, right? Like that was because that was former President Bush's big thing when he was in Texas politics, was limiting the amount of money that you could win in a personal injury lawsuit, right? So just like knowing that this is somebody who's just always willing to go with the win. But just to fast forward a little bit, he inherits this extremely centralized governor position from Rick Perry. And then he continues to expand on that using the same kind of tactics that Rick Perry used. And then COVID hits. And Texas was like almost every other state. They locked down, everyone was sort of following the same playbook until you started to see this backlash from, the right wing and particularly like small business owners. So Abbott almost immediately starts to rescind a lot of those restrictions. But the notable thing is he never has ended the state of disaster declaration that he put into place at the beginning. And the state of disaster declaration in Texas gives the governor the ability to basically act like a full-on executive without having to worry about anything that the legislative branch does. And it was set up in the 70s so that when there's a flood or something like, or a hurricane here, that you can get resources to people quickly. That's what it was designed for. And Abbott every month in a very, no frills, like kind of ceremony, extends that disaster declaration. And he's used that. First off, he was using that to basically overrule school districts, the legislature, cities, counties, all other kind of authority in the state. But it's not just limited to him basically blocking any kind of COVID restrictions. He's also declared a disaster at the border using COVID-19 as the pretense. So he is declared a disaster at the border, saying undocumented migrants are bringing over COVID-19 into Texas, so we need to have a state response to that. And he has created a parallel system to the Border Patrol. It has been a cash bonanza for private contractors, and it hasn't really done any of the things that he set out to do, like drop the politics, of what you want there. Like literally just like on what he sets out to do, he wants to catch, people bringing drugs over, etc. They're not really doing very much. And we're upwards of a few $1 billion. He's also building the wall. And it has been a real human disaster, not only from what people are facing who are trying to cross the border, but also for the National Guardsmen. I'm going to talk about suicides for a second, folks. The suicide rate of National Guardsmen is actually extremely high because people are stuck at the border, and people probably know how that system works. These people have civilian jobs, they lose their jobs, and because they're called up by the state, they don't make as much money as they would if the federal government was calling them up. They also don't get the same kind of health care that they would if they were getting called up by the federal government, or in the instance of them being killed in action, their families don't get, the government will immediately give you something near like $100,000 to your family, your immediate family, if somebody passes away. Here, they just get basically workers' comp, which is much more limited. It's paid out, every 2 weeks. There's a lot of paperwork, and it's very easy to, misfile. And you can imagine a family grieving in a moment like that, making a mistake, and they're not getting access to that. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people unfortunately have died. Most recently, must have been late April. A guardsman died drowning because he tried to save a migrant family that was trying to cross the Rio Grande. And, they have done nothing for them. And it's just a scandal top down. In that situation, it was extremely egregious because when they were getting grilled by the legislature, the National Guard's system and leadership there, what was the protocol for people getting into the water? They said, we don't have one. Do they have flotation devices? No. Just remember, their $3 billion has gone basically with no strings attached to these people, and they don't have a protocol about people going into the water. And remember, we're talking about the border in Texas. You're talking about the Rio Grande. You're talking about water. Right. It's extreme. The scandal goes really deep. Last thing just to note before, I'd like to hear y'all's thoughts on it, but like last thing to note too is, in addition to just the deployment of these National Guardsmen, they also ran a parallel system of truck checks. So when goods and services, but when trucks come over the border, they get checked by Border Control Customs, right? Abbott set up a parallel system where the National Guardsmen and state troopers were also inspecting trucks, which meant that all of the food, all of the goods that cross the border, we're talking, it's a significant border, a lot of trade goes through it on a daily basis, completely shut down for days. People weren't able to get over the border. Food was rotting in trucks. And again, remember, because he doesn't actually have the legal authority to create a system parallel to customs, all they could do was check the headlights and, you know, make sure nothing's hanging off the bottom of the truck. So it was pure symbolism. And what does he want to do with that? He wants to get invited on Tucker Carlson and impress Bubba Guy in Tennessee about how he's the real serious governor on the border. And I just have to note that, you know, in this moment when he finally got his big Fox News spot, the headline that, you know, the little ticker they put at the bottom was not Greg Abbott strong on the border. It was, is Greg Abbott the Ron DeSantis of Texas? Which is certainly not what he had intended there.
That's awesome. Well, is it Texas? Is that one of the places that the National Guard people are looking at unionizing?
Yes. So there has been, because the Biden administration, the Justice Department said that they will not, I can't remember the statute, but they will not pursue, because it's illegal for, servicemen to unionize in this country.
Right.
But there's a carve out for people who are called up on state level missions, and then they can unionize basically with the state employees union. And the Biden administration said that they will no longer prosecute National Guardsmen for doing that. So yeah, there's been a really exciting and promising movement of these National Guardsmen to start to unionize. Because I mean, like, you know, this is just, you know, bread and butter stuff. I mean, the craziest thing about the mission that they're on is that Biden has also called up the National Guard to the border as well. So oftentimes these guys are serving next to somebody who might be from New Mexico or something like that, right? A National Guardsman from New Mexico who's getting the federal pay, getting the federal health care benefits, getting all those kind of protections. They're doing the same job, and there's just like this, you know, bureaucratic difference in how they're being taken care of.
And are any of the, you know, anti-COVID people barking at Abbott for retaining these emergency powers?
No, because Abbott's smart, because you know, give him credit. Like he has a shrewd legal mind. You can see that even in the kind of bills that they've been passing through the legislature, like on abortion, for example, right, where it's not the government necessarily who's pursuing the cases against people, it's private citizens. Like they're finding ways to get around the legal system and the Constitution of Texas, basically. And the way that he does these COVID protocols, most people aren't really paying attention to him. There has been a lot of pushback from the right wing on his border actions, because they are just seen by most people as, one, failures, and two, just like, I mean, it's a huge giveaway. And even some of the crazy right wingers who ran against him for governor have been barking at him about, the waste that he's been creating. But no, I mean, that's why I wrote the piece for Sublation Magazine, because a lot of people don't realize where he's getting these powers from. A lot of people, you know, obviously, you know, state governments can be a little archaic and confusing for folks, don't realize that the governor actually traditionally doesn't have this power in the first place, in Texas, at least. So, you know, the way that he's doing it is quite sneaky. And, you know, I talk to people all the time here, and they have no idea that that's how he sort of has gotten all this extra executive power for himself over the past few months, past few years.
Are those checks still happening of vehicles coming across the border?
No, they shut it down. So basically it was an immediate disaster, and it cost the nation and the state, you know, somewhere upwards of like $12 billion to just trade shut down. And you know how capitalism works. People start making calls and demanding changes. So what he did was he had these really publicized meetings with governors from Mexico over the border states, where they signed a piece of paper that said, we will do more on the border. Again, like not legally binding. Again, this is like the point, though, and I think it's the point about the way a lot of Republicans are governing across the country right now too. We're like, the governor does not have the ability to sign foreign treaties. That is a power that is reserved for the federal government. And, you know, and Abbott is just doing this kind of stuff. And of course it's symbolic. And these agreements are toothless. But it gives him the ability to say, like, look, I made these guys, and you know, they drive to Austin, the Mexican governors, right? So it's like sort of embarrassing for them, you know. And yeah, it took him a little while to get everybody to sign, but all 4 of the governors of the, border states all sort of signed these, again, toothless agreements with him, and he shut it down. But the damage was done at that point. Like the second that he made that order, the delays were going to take probably 2 weeks to them, rectify themselves.
Right.
Yeah, that's just kind of mind-blowing when we're already experiencing supply chain issues. You're just going to make it worse all for a little PR that, it's hard to see how that even helps him in the long run. But I guess that's Texas politics, much like Alabama politics.
Well, I think he failed. I mean, by his own standards, I think that he thought that this was going to work out a little bit differently. I don't know really what he expected was going to happen. I think that they thought that maybe they'd catch somebody with fentanyl in a truck or something like that, and they didn't. And, and then I always remind people, it's like, you would know by now if they had been successful because there would have been a photo op.
Right.
Looking for so I think he
Chong,
exactly.
band.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Ben, we do still need them. We're going to be playing those clips here in just a second. But yeah, the right wing is never going to miss a media opportunity. if there is a victory to be had, perceived by them, then they're gonna take it. That's why somebody asked me about gas prices yesterday. Like, why do you think gas prices? He said, your side, quote unquote, doesn't seem to think that Biden's responsible or whatever. And I was like, well, yeah, I don't really think he is, because conservatives can never point to any oil production that he stopped that was going on and that he stopped. And so, we can talk about, the things that they point to don't even make any sense, like the Keystone Pipeline. It's not, I'm open to say, if he was stopping oil production and raising gas prices, will show me, but they don't. And so,
the one thing they could say would be the sanctions on Russia, which, that has been a choice. He doesn't have to have these sanctions, but that's not being pointed to.
Right.
Well, could I add to that real quick? Because this is an important point about private control of these systems, right? So, Biden has, they just in the Permian Basin here, they've approved, I think, something near 900 new permits for drilling. You'd think that with prices so high that you would see this massive increase in oil production. But the vast majority of the oil companies in Texas, they're not ramping up production. In fact, they're taking their windfall profits and they're paying off their shareholders in dividends. Right. So at this moment, we can feel about oil and gas however, we do. But at this moment, there's a social need for there to be more affordable gas prices. And this private system is actually making the conscious decision to continue to maintain high prices. And instead of taking profits that they're getting and using that to reinvest in production, to hire, because something like 200,000 people were fired during the pandemic in the oil and gas industry. And, we're talking mainly people on the drills themselves. You would think that, well, maybe they'd use that money to reinvest in oil production, to sort of take care of folks, lower the price, and also make some money for themselves. No, they're just paying off their shareholders so that they can hold a very nice, stock position, and people are more interested in investing in those companies in the future, right? That's the number one problem here. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not somebody who's going to sit here and shill for Joe Biden of all people. But yeah, no, the problem here is the private industry of oil production, not necessarily Joe Biden's policies, because he's running up on Trump now when it comes to opening up oil and gas permits in this country on public lands. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's very important, what you just shared about how that actually works, because that's, if anything, you could say Joe Biden is not addressing that problem, and therefore you could maybe throw some blame that way. But again, that's, not the perspective. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, that's the frustrating thing about, how politics gets interpreted by people in this country through the media is it's a Democrat bad or Republican bad, where it's typically if it is Joe Biden's fault, it's because of his fealty to capitalism. Right. Whether it's or it's because there's things we should have been doing a while ago. I mean, even this baby formula stuff too, right? It's like that's like it's going to get, it's played as like is it the Democrats' fault or Republicans? It's like, this is a American monopoly capitalism problem.
Right. Yeah, and the Fed increasing interest rates with the explicit goal to drive down wages from the Fed Chairman Powell. We just talked about that a second ago. Total political malpractice heading into the midterm. I mean, just from a totally cynical political point of view, if we don't even care about workers, going into like this is not the time to be doing that. Driving down wages.
Nixon would never.
As an explicit policy goal.
Trump would never either. And that's the thing that has been so annoying about all of this, as you're starting to see, the bubbling of interest rates, and it's very clear that the Fed has an intention to wage war on working people. What do you get from Biden? Biden gets praised by like liberal media and Politico because Biden came out and he says the number one goal is to protect the independence of the Federal Reserve, which is just so bogus. I'm sorry, y'all. Like the Federal Reserve and the policies of what is effectively our central bank here affect millions of people, and people need to stop treating these things as if they're outside of politics. And it's just so cowardly to see Biden basically
Trump's
roll
Fed
over.
Chairman. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and then like sorry to bring it back to the baby formula thing, but I'm just reminded of the Buttigieg quote. Let's be very clear: this is a capitalist country. The government does not make baby formula, nor should it. Companies make formula, and then still we have to talk about this in red versus blue,
Right.
versus blue. Yeah.
Yeah. What about the fact that both red and blue support that? Right. I mean, that there's where you start getting into the deeper issues of why is it that private industry alone is responsible for how we feed our babies. We have to rely on, essentially a handful of companies to be able to feed our kids. And if they don't see if they don't see a profit interest in this quarter, maybe they don't do it. So
and we're literally airlifting it in. We're airlifting it in now and acting like it's the free market that's going to solve the problem.
And just while we're sort of on this like kind of general question of oil and gas, and this is a good union show, I also just wanted to note something that's really important that's been happening here too with oil and gas workers. Texas, like Alabama, is a state that does not have a tremendous amount of union density, though most states in the country don't anymore. But a lot of that is concentrated in those historical industries like oil and gas. And what you've seen from the oil and gas companies, particularly like ExxonMobil, has been a really, really brutal campaign to decertify unions here. In Beaumont, Texas, they did a lockout that went on for about like 10 months. And they weren't able to secure a really better deal for their workers. And there was a decertification campaign there that they barely won. I mean, they won by like the skin of their teeth. And there's a pivot that we're seeing in the oil and gas industry right now towards union labor here to basically try to eradicate, the union workforce. And again, where is Biden sort of showing up for these people right now? And this, like, this is like, if you care about climate change, you cannot just sit on your ass when the oil and gas industry is basically trying to eradicate unions in the state of Texas.
Yeah, that's something that we never really did a deep dive on that, but definitely something that we were following as it was happening, and
a lot of parallels to the Warrior Met coal strike here in Alabama.
And like you said, just the idea that you would not, another poll just came out putting the approval rate of unions at something like 70%. High, much higher than either political party. And the idea that you wouldn't, as a government, as a politician, try to ride the coattails of that and go out on the picket line as the president of the United States or try to mediate this. Tim James, when he was running for governor, one of the things that he said on our program was Warrior Met doesn't want to tussle with the governor of Alabama, who has the ability to inspect their minds and make things very hard for them. That's like a real threat. And Biden has just as much or more authority than the governor of Alabama would, than the governor of Texas would on that issue with MSHA. And so why would you not be like, Beaumont, Texas, wow, you're really treating your, this company's really treating your workers really poorly. Let's OSHA, why don't you take a look in there and see what's going on and just see if there's, just do a spot check. Just do a spot check. I'm going to do that with one of my projects that I manage here with my safety person. We went on a site visit the other day, and she was like, well, I'm not really sure that I'm seeing what's representative, because they were allowed to kind of prep for it. They knew that the safety person was coming.
Mm-hmm.
So me and her are going to do like a secret surprise visit, like, hey, safety people, let's see what's going on here. Why don't OSHA just stop by Beaumont, Texas? Why don't the wage and hour division just stop by Beaumont, Texas? I mean, the idea that you're not using these mechanisms to the fullest extent that you can is absurd.
Or do what the workers there were asking the Biden administration to do. No federal contracts to this company until they restore them to their jobs, right? I mean, there really is such an absence of leadership, despite Biden sort of basking in this media portrayal of him as being like the most pro-union president of our lifetime.
Well, and there's no excuse for him either, because as we're going to get to later with his like dig at Elon, like he's conscious of unions.
Right.
He's conscious of the political utility that unions can serve for him. And I mean, I don't know, like in our lifetimes, like he's probably more pro-union than Bill Clinton. He's probably more pro-union than the Bushes, Obama. Like it's a very low bar, sadly.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think that when people say he's the most pro-union president since FDR, it's probably true, which like sucks ass. But it's probably true. It's not great though.
That's like being the least racist president. Okay, like
yeah.
All right. I
mean,
well, it's like how much of a compliment is it?
It's like whereas like all the previous presidents would have had just like the straight like I don't know what the EKG machine, it's just a flat line. Biden, occasionally you see just the barest like sort of like hint at a pulse, like with that the National Guard case, or him taking shots at Elon, or there's improvements to the bureaucracy, but it's way lacking for what the moment actually calls for. I think everybody thinks that.
Right.
Well, so David, speaking of the union stuff in Texas, I just saw this tweet came across my dashboard from the Austin Starbucks Workers United. You cannot make us settle down. Austin is a union town. Come on, y'all. Let's celebrate. Texas is a union state. Very cool. Starbucks Workers United, 24th and Nueces in Austin, Texas. But how, I don't know how closely you follow the Texas labor movement. I know that the Texas AFL-CIO endorsed Jessica Cisneros in both of her races against Henry Cuellar. What has been the state of labor in Texas as you see it?
I mean, it's a huge fight. I mean, what we're seeing, for example, with the Starbucks unions, I think is really encouraging. There's been a lot of push, for example, with folks here to really trying to expand unionization in the energy industry, particularly trying to focus on the growing solar and wind industry here, because that's one that really needs to be unionized, particularly like home installation, because the way that system works now is they basically get paid per panel. So you'll have people basically trying to bust their ass and, hold it, bringing up an entire panel on a ladder by themselves because they know they just have to like get as many done in a day. There's a lot of injury. There's a lot of burnout there. And there's been some pretty exciting efforts from like the Texas Climate Jobs Project. Other people here, I have friends in the IBEW here who are really trying to expand as, you're seeing more opportunities, at least in Austin with like Tesla and a lot of these companies that are moving out here. There's a lot of jobs. And hopefully trying to grow that movement. But it's a tough moment because while we're seeing, some growth in, things like Starbucks unions and like just areas where, you didn't typically see too much unionization, the labor movement as a whole is, on its back feet and really trying to fight and push back against a really entrenched and I think purposeful at this point, movement to, try to unionization in a lot of the areas, where it traditionally existed. But I mean, like where you see the National Guards Union is really exciting. Starbucks Union is really exciting. Some of the growth in the electrical industry is really exciting. But I think that particularly, I'll just speak to sort of, my general audience here on the left, that like, I think people need to get a little bit more comfortable showing up for some of these communities that a lot of kind of like lefties generally sort of ignore. And I'm talking about oil and gas workers and things like that, because that's the most viable. And also, if you're talking about climate change, the most important industry really to try to incorporate into the union movement right now. It's tough because too, politically, the unions are sort of in a rough position because, while they're, endorsing, for example, Cisneros statewide, it's like they don't get much politically for showing up for Democrats,
Right.
And it's a difficult situation for them trying to figure out how to make political interventions where it's like, okay, well, we can support like the pro-labor Democrat, but they're going to lose by 60 points in the election. And we don't really get much when it comes to, legislative sessions and things of that nature.
Right. Well, and then the last thing on Texas, how are people feeling? What has been the community response to the shooting in Uvalde, as far as on the gun issue, on the police issue, as just as a tragic human event? How have people been responding to that?
Well, I mean, it's tough. I mean, like, so in Austin, I think people probably feel the same way that they felt before, right? Where there's a lot of support for, more gun control measures. I think you're seeing a kind of invigoration of Beto to sort of push this. I mean, everyone knows that famous line that Beto did in the 2020 when he ran for president, where he said he was going to come for your AR-15s. And, the common sense was like, okay, well, that's going to be playing 24/7 here in Texas. Going into the governor election, they probably will still use it, but I don't think it's going to hit the same way. I think what's most interesting to start to see if there's any kind of pivots or movement on this issue is what's happening in Uvalde, where particularly there's a lot of pushback against police. And, when people are seeing that these guys are sitting out there in their tactical gear, basically having coffee and hanging out with one another while somebody is murdering children, there's a lot of real serious questions about how much the police actually do for folks. And, in that community, reading some of the kind of on the ground reporting and interviews with people has been, I mean, first of all, obviously tragic, and very interesting to start to see people trying to, a lot of people have abandoned, kind of earlier held positions about, the sanctity of police. You can't ever criticize the police. But also some people are trying to find ways to sort of maintain that with just like the undeniable criticism that you have to, lob at these folks. I don't know how much it's going to be interesting to see if anything is able to sort of direct any of that energy somewhere, right? Because Abbott, the Democrats have basically asked for a special session, and like Texas is like different from a lot of other places. It's like the state that has the the shortest legislative window. It's every 2 years. It's very quick. But they can call a special session, and they're trying to get Abbott to call a special session. What he has called for is a special committee, which is where a bunch of boys get together in Austin and they talk to each other, and they release a press release. But even that special committee has been extremely limited to talking about doors and social media, stuff that, frankly has nothing, very little, if anything, to do with the crisis itself. So I think the people who are the most fervent about this were probably already, at least on gun control in general. I don't know what that's going to mean necessarily for the long term of the state, but I do think that the kind of untouchable question of, like, for example, like an AR-15 is a little bit less holy here. And I mean, just to be clear with folks too, like, the constitutional carry, which is what they did in response to El Paso, where, a bigot drove across the state to murder people there. The response to that from the government here was to make make it legal to carry a handgun without a permit, which is just ridiculous. And that law is extremely unpopular, like across the board, Republicans and Democrats. Well, because nobody wants a guy to be sitting around without having any kind of basic training or permit or anything like that, carrying a gun in a Starbucks here. And I remind folks all the time too, that like, despite the kind of image that's put forward by the right wing, the first laws that were put on the books here when Texas became a country and then a state were actually to limit firearms in public. Firearms and knives were the first things that were put into place here. So like the Texas tradition actually is to say, keep your guns. We respect that, but you're not bringing your weapons out into public. You're not bringing your weapons in the public square. And this new era that we're in here with permitless carry, constitutional carry, is really charting a new path. And I think, probably the most hopeful and likely result from this might be a successful push to start to claw back some of those rules, because there's not really a popular constituency for those. The popular constituency for those are Republicans who get a lot of money from the NRA, not necessarily everyday voters here. But until like the Democratic Party can sort of crawl itself out of the hole, there's not going to be much of a vehicle to shift these things. And that's sort of the number one issue with a lot of things here.
Right. Yeah. I feel you on that, the Democratic Party needing to crawl itself out of a hole. It's really, really bad in Alabama. So I am the Majority Report the other day with the fact that, where the Democratic gubernatorial candidates are in a runoff now, and both of them are anti-abortion. One of them was endorsed by the Democrats for Life, and the other was the only Democrat in the state to not vote against. She abstained when Alabama in 2017 or 2019 passed its abortion ban that does not include any exceptions for rape or incest, and is, I believe, at the moment of conception. And she didn't vote against it. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. So let's go to something a bit lighter.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's talk about Elon Musk.
Another new Texan.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the photo of him with the big cowboy hat. I've seen that getting a lot of play lately.
The cyber rodeo, sorry not to cut you off, friend, but like the cyber rodeo was probably one of the most dystopian things I've ever seen. We did a whole segment on it.
What was that?
So it was because they built their big gigafactory here. And when it like officially opened up, they did a big celebration. So a bunch of people who've been living here for like 9 months drove down to Congress and went to Allen Boots and bought a new hat for themselves and showed up to hang out with like tech boys from San Francisco. And like they had a petting zoo. They had these very strange bulls, like mechanical bulls, but they weren't up on anything. They were just like sitting on the ground, sort of like menacingly.
Okay.
I don't know. It was just like, it was a very awkward try to like, dress up and play cowboy for a weekend, amongst people who have no real connection to that culture and certainly to the state.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing that kind of put him in the news was his return to work memo. And that was, my first reaction to that was, what a kind of like reactionary piece of shit, right? Because a lot of these people don't, if you don't have to work, if you've been able to do telework, then you should be able to continue to do telework, at least to a certain degree. But then I saw that it was executives, and I was like, okay, well, I don't really care that much. And then somebody mentioned that they think this is a precursor to layoffs, and I was like, what? Really? You think that? And then the layoffs came. He's laying off 10% of Tesla workers, 10,000 workers across the U.S. Like, that is huge. And it seems to, I mean, don't you think that it's all kind of stemming from his debacle with purchasing Twitter?
Oh,
I was going to say it's hard to know the causality. Like, is the causality because he knew his businesses were in trouble, or is his businesses in trouble because he did that dumb shit with Twitter? Like, I find it hard to know which way that goes. But I will just say one of the executives he did mention by name in that letter was the HR folks at the Fremont factory in California. And the Fremont factory is the one with all those horrible like racist like allegations against it. Like, people should check out, like, I think the LA Times for the full language on the types of things that were going on, as well as, like, you're just making black people work the hardest jobs.
Right.
Yeah, and More Perfect Union, I know, did some coverage of that as well.
Yep.
And I was just going to mention, I can't help but imagine part of the reason Tesla's in Texas in the first place was for the very favorable business climate, they would say. And I think there's a lot of parallels between Texas and Alabama and really the rest of the South, in that these companies from California, New York, and from other countries, they come here because they know the state government's in their pocket. They know it's a hostile environment to unions. They know the wages are lower, the education levels are lower, and they see it as an opportunity to exploit us Southerners, really.
Last stop on the way to Mexico.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's true. And like, I mean, like, macro level, the Twitter debacle plays into this, I think, because, like, people need to remember about Tesla is that it is like a perfect example of, like, the kind of largesse that we have seen for, like, big corporations in the past few years in the era of cheap money from the Fed, right? That Tesla, they produce no cars, man. Like, they don't produce very many cars, and it's the most valued car company in the world, right? Which is ridiculous. And what that means then is, for the company, they have to watch their stock very closely. And as Tesla has started to bleed, because Musk has been showing himself to be extremely erratic, and I don't know if people have seen, his tweets in general over the past few weeks. I mean, if it was a friend, I would call them. You know what I mean? Like, because you're very worried about the state of this person's mind and what that means for people who are investors. They sell their stock, and this is just another perfect reality of example of, like, the system that we're in, where Musk is being an irresponsible owner of a company, and then he's now to make up for that, the punishment is going to go on the backs of workers. And he did say that, like, it seems it's going to be mainly white collar people who are they're going to be targeting with this. But remember that, like, particularly since they've moved so much of their operations to Texas, 10% is a large part of their workforce. And think, if you had, like, lived in New York or California your entire life, you have to move to Austin, Texas because of this guy, uproot your family, get a house here or something like that. And then in, like, 3 months, you get a pink slip because the boss has been tweeting too much. I mean, it's really it's really devastating. And it's another good example is why, Elon Musk always says, well, we love, billionaires are very important because we are very good at capital allocation, right? And you're seeing that he's actually really shit at it, and it has, like, very significant consequences for everybody else.
Yeah, well, and I mean, the layoffs are isolated to Tesla. I mean, in the car manufacturing space, in the U.S. car manufacturing space, he is alone in this. And to illustrate that, let's go ahead and play that clip of Biden responding to a question at a press conference, Adam.
Elon Musk has said that he has a super bad feeling about the U.S. economy. He's laying off 10%. You say to Elon Musk about his feeling about the economy. Jamie Dimon has said similar things.
Well, let me tell you, while Elon Musk is talking about that, Ford is increasing their investment overwhelmingly. I think Ford is increasing the investment in building new electric vehicles, 6,000 new employees, union employees, I might add, in the Midwest. The former Chrysler Corporation, Stellantis, they are also making similar investments in electric vehicles. Intel is adding 20,000 new jobs for making computer chips. Lots of luck on this trip to the moon. I mean, I don't.
President, you going to Saudi Arabia? Yeah.
So, I mean, it's pretty good rhetoric, I think, and pretty good dismissal of him. But it goes to show that and in addition to what he cited, Ford is building the biggest car manufacturing plant, if not in the world, in America right now, just west of Memphis, that is being built by union tradespeople. I know the ironworkers sponsor the program, are sending some people out there. They're recruiting some people for that. The IBEW is as well, sponsor the program. I mean, this is going to be a huge, there's lots of investment, and I think it's still kind of up in the air whether or not these workers will be UAW represented west of Memphis. But there's lots of investment going on in manufacturing in the United States right now. And I think it shows a weakness on the part of Tesla that at this time, while so much investment is going into manufacturing, they're cutting back.
And this is like, there's another point that Elon Musk made, I think either right before or in the wake of these layoffs, where he was talking about everybody at Tesla is the same. And he was saying there are no special cafeterias for workers. We all use the same bathrooms. There's no high ceiling, is not high ceiling, office on the 10th floor, right? Where only, the executives are allowed. And I can't remember who made this point. It might've been Max Berger, but somebody just retweeted the difference in pay from the average worker at Tesla to the CEO and said, I don't know if it's very much true that all these things are exactly equal or exactly the same.
Right. Yeah.
You know what
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, what I find fascinating is the way the right is adopting Elon and acting as if he's like some sort of big liberal and not some sort of titan of industry. But I'm just reading the Dave Rubin show, which maybe I'll just listen to this afternoon. But Elon Musk's harsh message for his Tesla employees. This was came out yesterday. Dave Rubin of the Rubin Report. I know that's the podcast. I don't know why they start there. It talks about Elon Musk's harsh words for the employees of Tesla. An email from Musk to his Tesla employees said that remote work will no longer be allowed, and anyone who wants to continue working from home will be fired. At a time when most businesses seem to be taken hostage by their employees, this type of stern leadership is a welcome change. And I just appreciate some of the starkness about okay, Dave,
harder, please.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Jeez. Wow.
Something, David, I think maybe you brought this up about the Tesla stock and how unmoored from reality that has been. We've seen so much of our economy over the decades has just been absorbed by finance. So much is just speculation. And I think Tesla is a great example of that. There's been plenty of these Silicon Valley companies where, their stock is going through the roof, but they're not actually making anything. In some cases, they're not even making profits. It's just, it's a bubbles upon bubbles. And that's one of the things that just blows my mind sometimes, is trying to think about the American economy and just how much of it's fake. It's just casinos.
Before David jumps in, I just want to say, that's what my sense is too. And Dave follows close to me, but it seems like so much of that is betting on future monopolies, right? Uber and whatever. It's it's that the investor class is let's get the next thing that's a monopoly where we can just control the world, or at least a bigger part of the world as that industry can command.
And the problem with Tesla is that it doesn't look like it's going to be a monopoly on on electric cars, because we're seeing pretty successful ones coming out from the other manufacturers. I mean, not to get too theoretical about this, but this is a point that Frederick Engels made a long time ago, which is that capitalists, despite the fact that they are involved and invested in the system, they hate production. And they would prefer to get as far away from production as possible and pursue fictitious capital. And it's this kind of mania of the boom and bust cycle that we live in, where, this is people Marxists have been making this argument for a long time that the fundamentals of the capitalist economy trend toward crisis. And the trend towards crisis is the kind of sprinting away from the actual material reality of production, the actual labor that is going into the products and the goods and services that we're using. And Tesla is just like a perfect example of that kind of irrational system, a company that's been able to amass incredible amounts of not just wealth, but political power and power at large, despite the fact that it's very untethered from the actual reality. And it doesn't take very much of, a reality shock to really make that whole system start to crumble really quickly. And it just shows that the system is inherently irrational as long as we, allow these people to basically make decisions. It's the same thing with Tesla as it is with the oil companies, as I was talking about earlier, right? It's like, the production is secondary to the profit. And, you can find ways to sort of patch that up for a short period of time, especially at moments where there's a lot of money sort of, flowing around. But the second that, the belts have to get a little bit tighter, crisis abounds.
Right. Well, Matt, you mentioned Dave Rubin's plea to Elon Musk to discipline him harder. And that is something that's been happening a lot. This is a sentiment that's been that has been echoed across the right-wing / dude bro podcasting space. And we've got this clip from Joe Rogan that you tweeted out, Matt, where he talks about he just kind of goes on a rant about human nature. So Adam, let's play that clip from Joe Rogan.
All right, I can't wait to learn about human nature from Joe Rogan.
Today, the left has gone so fucking far left, so radical, that the right are the ones that are celebrating comedians and celebrating Chappelle.
Yeah,
and they had my back through all the crazy shit that happened with me. It was Fox News that fucking had my back.
Would you ever think that they would be the ones to cape for you, 10 years ago?
I'm so liberal.
Yeah,
I talk about it all the time. Like I say, I am not a conservative. I'm not conservative. But I am pro Second Amendment, and I am a hunter, and I am a cage fighting commentator, and I drink and I smoke cigars, and I like to bow hunt. Yeah. So there's a lot.
Now, just pause it just for a second, because up to this point, this is not necessarily
like. I believe that there's boy.
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. If you could rewind it for just when you start it back, because that up to that point, he's like, okay, you're pro Second Amendment. That's arguably a right wing position, but everything else is not like a right wing thing. He's like, I'm not conservative, but all of these like cultural things that are oftentimes associated with conservatives, but like, I'll smoke a cigar and I like to drink and I don't.
That's a good point.
I wouldn't mind going bow hunting. Like, I don't have a bow, but if somebody wanted to take me bow hunting, I'd be like, well, hell yeah, let's fucking go. These are not conservative things. These are just like things. I don't know.
Yeah, it might skew, hunting might skew Republican a little bit, but like if you come from a hunting background, you know that they're fucking Democrat hunters.
Right.
Right. And I think Joe experiences going out with maybe it's not Trump Jr., but those types of folks. And you think it's just like an exercise in right-wing ideology.
Right. I mean, I love smoking a cigarette with a glass of with a glass of bourbon. That's so much fun. I love that. And if you bring me a cigar, you bring me a fancy ass cigar, I would like it even more, but I'm just a poor person, right? But it's so that was just such a bizarre collection of statements that he put as a juxtaposition to I'm not conservative, but all of these things. And that doesn't make you a conservative, liking to drink and liking to smoke. That doesn't make you conservative. Mm-hmm. But let's go ahead and play the rest of that clip because he gets into human nature after that.
All right, and just bear with me as I try to get us back to that right spot.
Today, the left has gone so fucking far left, so radical, that the right are the ones that are celebrating comedians and celebrating Chappelle.
Yeah,
they had my back through all the crazy shit that happened with me. It was Fox News that fucking had my back.
Would you ever think that they would be the ones to cape for you, 10 years ago?
I'm so liberal.
Yeah.
I talk about it all the time. I say, I am not a conservative. I'm not conservative. But I am pro Second Amendment, and I am a hunter, and I am a cage fighting commentator, and I drink and I smoke cigars, and I like to bow hunt.
Yeah.
So there's a lot in there that's like, hey,
crossover.
Yeah, but it's just being a human. But I'm a compassionate person, and I believe that there's I'll tell you what though. One thing that happened during this pandemic was it opened my eyes about human nature. Like, I used to be very pro universal basic income. My thought was, wouldn't it be great if you just had enough money so you could eat and you could pay your rent and then you could pursue what you wanted to? But the reality of human nature came fully into focus when I realized that when some people got all that money from the government, the COVID money, and then they got unemployment, they didn't want to work. I have a friend who has a restaurant. He could not get people to come back to work.
Yeah.
And so one buddy of mine, a bartender told him, I can come back to work, but I can only work for 20 hours a week because that way I get unemployment. So he wouldn't work more than 20 hours a week so he could get free money. So he could have made more money, but he didn't want to because he didn't want to work. So he was getting that free money. And then my friend was like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah.
Like, okay. Like, and now he's always short staffed and it's a mess.
Yeah.
Like, you see a lot of people that own businesses that have a hard time finding people work for them. So there's pros to that, right? The pros are people. It's a marketplace that favors the worker, so workers can ask for more money. So you're seeing a lot of places like bars and restaurants and stuff that have to pay more money per hour, which I guess is good as long as the restaurant can stay open.
Well, I'm glad he thinks it might be good if we get a raise. It's wild that this guy is supposed to be like counterculture.
Yeah. I mean, like I told you on Twitter, Matt, like
that ain't the counterculture I grew up with.
Yeah. I mean, you can tell my buddy who owns a bar. Like, how many people just have a buddy that owns a bar? You know, I have buddies who bartend and you can just tell who he runs around with and who he empathizes with. And he kind of, he walked back a little bit towards the end where he was like, oh, I don't know, maybe it's good. He said maybe it's good that workers are getting more money. But you can tell he's really, really empathizing with the poor bar owner who, this guy only wants to work 20 hours a week, which if you give me a bartender and she would work full time if you paid them enough. But I would be willing to bet I would not be unsurprised if his bar owner buddy is only paying these people like $2 an hour, right?
Yeah.
And they're making their living on tips.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's tough for Joe because compassion is a really difficult thing to sort of exercise when you have to be compassionate on the one hand for hungry people that want to like live their lives. And on the other hand, you have to be compassionate for bar owners who need drinks made. And I think, I mean, the brilliant, beautiful thing about this clip is, like you say, it starts with the social issues, but often it just stays there. And it's just like, hey, I agree with you on all this stuff. I'm one of you guys. Very rarely does it go like, but on the economic issues, particularly when it comes to coercion of the labor force, I am not on your side anymore. Like, it makes things very clear, and there's not a whole lot really of commentary, except there's one thing I do want to add before I let David go, is that Joe Rogan co-founded a company called Onnit Labs, which makes, you might have heard of Alpha Brain, and then some other like Shroom Tech mushroom type of sport supplement. That was bought by the Unilever Corporation. Nonetheless, that got $2.4 million in PPP granted to them for gift loans. So when Joe comes about like the government giving money out to folks and what that does to their motivation, well, it's Onnit Labs. What are they doing now? Are they just sitting on their ass because they got free government money, or are they trying to come out with that next Alpha Brain iteration that's really going to help people focus on their Joe Rogan podcast?
And I mean, I just add like, because I think that the whole clip I think it's worthwhile because it's very revealing of the mentality that Joe Rogan has, as y'all are noting, with the social issues, and then immediately when it comes to anything that's political, it's this kind of anti-worker tirade. But let's also like. Interrogate this example for a second. I don't know where his bar owner friend is, but I know here you can't deny work and get unemployment, right? So because the unemployment system in this country is actually set up to just carry you and put you in a position where you actually lose your right to say no to work. So it is not
just on that. The Alabama Department of Labor sent out a notice to like members of all the Chamber of Commerces across the state and business owners to like, hey, here is the place that you report people for refusing to work so that we can take them off of the unemployment rolls. Like, they're very serious about this.
and here it's like, it's humiliating. Like, my mother lost her job during the pandemic. My mom is like one of the hardest working people I know. She's worked 60 hours a week, wage labor, her entire life. And she, first time in her life, she needed something like that. And you know what they make you do here is, and on top of like not being able to refuse work, they make you get set up with a counselor who teaches you work ethic, right? Which is just so insulting as a concept. But like, like the kind of picture that you get from guys like Joe, it's like, it just again shows like, you're talking about like what kind of guy has like, is friends with the owners, right? It also shows that like you don't know anybody in that system, because anybody who knows how that system works would be able to tell you straight up, no, it doesn't work like that.
Right.
And like maybe that conversation happened. Like I was saying to Matt on the show, like, sometimes people think like, oh, I can't get I'm going to deny a raise because my taxes will go up, right? And that's not true, right? It's not how it works, but sometimes people might think that. So like, maybe the conversation did happen and it's not just a made up thing. But again, it just shows what side of the conversation that Joe and his cohort are on here very clearly.
Right. Yeah.
And I will just say, it's been very hard
to do unemployment, and it's not a fucking generous giveaway.
Yeah.
But I don't make millions of dollars talking about dudes fighting each other and a podcast. So there you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I will just say, finally, it's been heartening to see his Reddit sort of turn on him on these sorts of questions. That's
that's good to hear.
The people are out there. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, because the people who are bow hunting and smoking cigars and drinking bourbon probably are closer to the unemployment rolls than they are to the PPP loans, man.
Yeah,
right.
I'm thinking about like I worked at a sports bar. I don't know, about 10 years ago when UFC was like really hitting it big. It seemed to be kind of the peak of its popularity. And I think back to the crowds we would get for the big fight nights. Everybody'd show up on Saturday nights to see the pay-per-view at the bar. Yeah, not many millionaires among that crowd. It all seemed like, working class folks for the most part. And I just, I don't see where many of them are getting these handouts. I'm glad you mentioned the PPP loans, because if there were any just, the government throwing money at people, it was that,
Right.
We know about, tens of millions of dollars in fraud, and that's just what we know of. There, God only knows how much money just disappeared into people's pockets through that. And it wasn't, everyday people, normal, regular working people. We were not having money thrown at us. If we did, I missed the fucking boat on that. Someone find it for me, because I didn't get that. We got our little measly stimulus checks that weren't even as much as what we were promised, and got the child tax credit for 6 months. It was nice. It was better than what I'd been getting. But to act as if like that somehow was throwing money at me and discouraging me from working hard, it shows that he is not living in that world. He probably doesn't have anyone close to him who's living in that world. And I'm sure, he's been a millionaire for a long time. So, maybe he remembers back in his early days what it was like to really have to sell your labor to survive. But
well, and on the factual question of what he was talking about, he was like, well, I used to support UBI because, maybe that would give people a chance to pursue their passion, so that maybe they wouldn't be so tied to, they could better themselves or something. And that's exactly what people, by and large, the reason that low-wage employers are having difficulty filling jobs is because workers who had those kind of jobs took the time that they were on unemployment to better themselves, to maybe get an education, to get a different job, to go into the trades, to get something that was a more reliable, to go up into a better paying industry. There were early retirements. There were people, we've had 1 million people die in this country, a lot of whom were workers, so that's exactly what you would expect if people took the money to do what he thinks he wanted people to do. It's just that's the consequence, is that people that he's friends with are going to have a more difficult time finding workers who are willing to toil for nothing.
Yeah,
It seems
I mean
to
that's the end game there, and it's like it's funny to see where his sympathy ends, right? It's like,
Right.
oh, I've had to wait a little bit longer for my barbecue. Actually, people shouldn't be able to eat and pursue their own interests anymore. Yeah, I mean that's the thing that's so disappointing about Rogan is that like. Despite there, being some moments when he was like sort of pushing Bernie, which I thought was helpful, you just realize very quickly that this guy is just going to revert to to his class interest at the end of the day, despite all the counterculture BS that he promotes. This is somebody who is a boss and thinks like one.
Yeah, absolutely. And that ought to really reiterate to my hippie friends and brothers and sisters out there, just because someone like takes mushrooms doesn't mean they're going to be enlightened for the rest of their
Rick
lives.
Perry is doing the mushrooms now, of all people.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean they'll take anything from us.
Nothing is sacred.
Nothing is sacred. Even our damn mushrooms, they will take them from us.
Yeah. Just one final note on the PPP stuff is like, if you actually look at the CARES Act and like all the money that was spent, it's like, okay, this slice here, 2,000 a little bit for like checks given to people. And then like the extra a little bit for unemployment for certain people that got unemployed. That adds up to maybe like a couple thousand. And then it's over 10,000 per individual person per capita that was spent given to corporate America. And what the fuck, like, and now they're complaining that they don't know how to get people to work. It's like, cough it up. Like that, right?
Right.
Yeah. And meanwhile, prices on the goods and services they provide have been skyrocketing. Yeah. I mean, all these things a confluence of issues there, but yeah, the PPP part, I think that has just been memory hold for a lot of folks. It seems like that's been memory hold. We just focus on, don't you remember your stimulus check and the unemployment expanded benefits that so many people were never able to get in the first place.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a very important part of this equation.
Yeah. Yep. Matt, David, thank y'all for hanging out with us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
Fun,
and
guys.
Patience, guys.
Yep.
Oh, of course, we always love talking with y'all.
Yep.
All right. Y'all have a good one.
Peace.
And that's going to be it for us as well. You've been listening to the Valley Labor Report. Been listening to Matt Lech, David Griscom from Left Reckoning. Find them on YouTube, on Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, all those places.
Yeah, definitely check them out. They're
yeah.
good folks, as you could tell, like-minded good folks. And yeah, we've had a couple of guest spots on there, so check it out if you get a chance.
Yep. And with that, we're going to head out too. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Bye, y'all.